Faites l'appel, Monsieur le greffier, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Senator Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Senator Farnham.
Présent.
Madame the Senator Ferguson. Monsieur le Senator Lafondry.
Présent.
Madame the Senator Valwell.
Present.
Madame the Senator Moore.
Present.
Monsieur le Senator Pallet.
Présent.
Monsieur le Senator Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Helier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sever. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Griville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean. Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen. Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin. Madame the Deputy Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame the Deputy de Greville.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Lewis.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier. Monsieur le Deputy Higgins.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Masson.
Présent.
Madame the Deputy Pinel.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame the Deputy Doublé.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Labby.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Young.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Ash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel. Monsieur le Deputy Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame the Deputy Lahegara. Monsieur le Deputy Iron.
Présent.
Madame the Deputy Pochard.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame the Deputy Alves.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin.
Présent.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et les puissances de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours bu la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute l'heure de libération est accompagnée de la bénédiction, réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il t'a plu de commettre à le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne. Ta volonté soit faite en la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi la reine, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Madame the Senator Ferguson. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
C'est faux.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
C'est faux.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen. Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Monsieur le Deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Les États sont constitués. First of all, I'm pleased on your behalf to welcome His Excellency Lieutenant Governor. Secondly, can I mention briefly that there was a court use of the members' room during the last week or 10 days, which may have caused some inconvenience to members. I have to say that I don't think it was appropriate the court used the members' room for that day, and I would like to offer my apologies to members for that purpose. There's nothing further under A. Under B and C are on the agenda. D, notification of lodged propositions. The draft Revenue Administration Jersey Law Amendment lodged P122, lodged by the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. Gerrier, promotion by the public sector, Second Amendment, P143, lodged by Deputy Mussell. Draft Amendment number 38 of Standing Orders, P1 of 2019 Amendment, lodged by Deputy Morel. The Future Hospital rescindment of Gloucester Street as the preferred site, P5 Amendment, lodged by the Constable of St Helier. Future Hospital rescindment of Gloucester Street as preferred site, P5 Amendment, Second Amendment, lodged by Deputy Morel. Future Hospital rescindment of Gloucester Street as preferred site, P5 Third Amendment, lodged by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Future Hospital rescindment of Gloucester Street as preferred site, Third Amendment to the amendment lodged by the Constable of St Helier. Future Hospital rescindment of Gloucester Street as preferred site, Third Amendment, Second Amendment, that is the Second Amendment to the Third Amendment, for those who haven't yet gone to sleep as members of the public listening to this, lodged by Deputy Morel. Future Hospital rescindment of Gloucester Street as the preferred site, Second Amendment to the Third Amendment, and a further amendment lodged by the Council of Ministers. Island Plan, revised 2011, site to be rezoned for Category A housing, Field 632 and part of Field 559 at P13, lodged by the Constable of St Peter. The draft European Union Wines, Spirits, Milk and Dairies Savings Jersey Regulations, P14, lodged by the Minister for External Relations. The draft European Union United Kingdom Exit Alternative Investment Funds Regulations, P15, lodged by the Minister for External Relations. Restriction on smoking warning notices, amendment for UK exit from the EU, Jersey Regulations, P16, lodged by the Minister for Health and Social Services. Draft Employment Amendment number 11, Jersey Law, P17, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. The Draft Commissioner for Children and Young People, Jersey Law, P18, lodged by the Minister for Children and Housing. Now, although the order paper suggests that two of the amendments to the Future Hospital rescindment proposition are to be withdrawn, in fact, I understand that they are not, and they will therefore remain on the table. There is nothing under F or G or H. Now, this time, the more observant members will have noted that there are cameras taking place, and those cameramen are about to withdraw.
Sir, may I, just a matter of interest, ask who they were that were filming us this morning?
There's a programme being done, which I approved about a week ago. I'm really glad you asked me that question, Senator. I'm really glad you asked me that question, Senator, not least because the main one is for Digital Jersey, for which you are responsible. We come to written questions. The Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Mussell regarding the regulation of the estate agency industry. The President of the Chairman's Committee will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Mussell regarding the purpose of scrutiny public hearings. The Minister for Home Affairs will table an answer to a question asked by the Constable of St Lawrence regarding the number of employees in his department. The Minister for Health and Social Services will table an answer to a question asked by the Constable of St Lawrence regarding the number of employees working for the ambulance service. The Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture will table an answer to a question asked by the Deputy of St Peter regarding the regulation of Airbnb accommodation. The Minister for Treasury and Resources will table an answer to a question asked by the Deputy of St Peter regarding the cost of the Ville du Manoir housing project in St Peter. The Minister for Health and Social Services will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Labby regarding the delivery of health and social services, a new way forward. The Minister for Treasury and Resources will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Southern regarding the comparative tax paid by employees and self-employed people. The Chairman of the Privileges and Procedures Committee will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding the expenditure limits set in the Public Elections Expenditure and Donations Jersey Law 2014. The Chairman of the Privileges and Procedures Committee will table an answer to a question asked by Senator Mezek regarding the role of conventions in the procedures of the States Assembly. The Minister for Social Security will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Ward regarding expenditure on housing benefit in 2017 and 2018. The Minister for the Environment will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Ward regarding the island's targets for CO2 emissions. The Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Ward regarding the monitoring of car park use at sports facilities. The Minister for Health and Social Services will table an answer to a question asked by Senator Ferguson regarding the prescription of medicinal cannabis products. The Minister for Health and Social Services will table an answer to a question asked by Senator Ferguson regarding the accommodation occupied by health staff. Her Majesty's Attorney General will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Pamplin regarding the legal provisions relating to the assessment of public interest in determining planning applications. The Minister for the Environment will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Pamplin regarding a timeline of the planning applications for the future hospital. The Minister for Infrastructure will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Pamplin regarding maintenance and building works required at the General Hospital in the next 10 years. The Minister of Health and Social Services will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Pamplin regarding something or other. Regarding the maintenance work and other vital building works that, in his view, are required to keep the current hospital running for the next 10 years. That's the wrong one. Anyway, but I think that's just a repeat on the order paper. The Minister for External Relations will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Pamplin regarding the Appointed Day Act for Article 20 of the Dormant Bank Accounts, Jersey Law 2017. The Minister for Children and Housing will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding legislation to prevent the discrimination by landlords against tenants with children. Her Majesty's Attorney General will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding the misuse of drugs, Miscellaneous Amendments No. 7, Jersey Order 2018. The Chairman of the States Employment Board will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Southern regarding the civil service grades allocated to scrutiny officers. The Minister for Education will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding the number of school students studying a modern foreign language. The Minister for Health and Social Services will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding information on the number of patients in the island suffering from dementia. The Minister for Infrastructure will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding a Pareto analysis of the work undertaken in his portfolio. The Minister for the Environment will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding the same analysis of the work undertaken in his portfolio. The Minister for Home Affairs will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding the same analysis of the work undertaken in his portfolio. The Minister for Education will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding the place of modern foreign languages in standard curriculum for the island schools. The Chief Minister will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Southern regarding the security of data kept by the government on European Union nationals. The Minister for Treasury and Resources will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Alves regarding the efficiency plan to identify £30 million in savings. The Minister for Home Affairs will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Alves regarding the monitoring of police closed-circuit television surveillance cameras. The Minister for Social Security will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Alves regarding the prospective use of agency workers to administer income support. The Minister for Infrastructure will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Southern regarding the presence of asbestos in states' buildings. The President of the Chairman's Committee will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Southern regarding the impact of the government's target operating model on the scrutiny function. We now come to oral questions.
Sir, sorry, can I just raise the defo on the Constable of St John's, please?
Proposed the defo be raised on the Constable of St John. The defo is raised. We now come to oral questions. The first oral question, Deputy Ward will ask of the Minister for Social Security.
Thank you, sir. So may I ask the Minister, will the Minister review the system of repayments of overpayment of social security where recipients have not committed any deliberate deception and or where it is clearly a social security miscalculation or error to ensure the system is fair on such recipients?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Deputy. I am satisfied that the system for managing overpayments of social security is fair. People can be overpaid benefits for a number of reasons, but in all cases, people have been paid more than they were entitled to. So it is appropriate that this money is repaid. In most cases, the money is paid back by a weekly deduction from their ongoing benefits. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The real-life outcome is often to keep people at the minimum level of income or even below it for sometimes years, and in these circumstances which are not of their making. And there are a number of, this question has come from a number of cases that we deal with as deputies. Do you consider that to be a fair situation?
So, as already said, there can be many reasons that a benefit is overpaid, and our system is benefits paid in advance. To look at the overall system would be to go something like the universal credit and pay in arrears, because every time somebody's income increases in that week, they may have worked, they may have done a bit of overtime, it needs to be repaid the next week. So I really don't understand where the Deputy thinks I can change the system. Yes, there'll be mistakes on both sides, but the benefit is the benefit, and if it's overpaid, the benefit, unfortunately, needs to be repaid back so it can then go on to other people needing benefits. Thank you, sir.
So just a point of clarification, if I can. The questions regarding historic payments that were in error, not necessarily payments that were because of a change in circumstance within a week or a month. Some of these go back 5 years or so and weren't picked up for 3 or 4 years. I think it's an important distinction to make that.
Thank you, Sarah. And I understand where the Deputy is coming from. In some cases, obviously, historically, these weren't picked up quick enough. There was things that I passed in P77 that allows the benefit systems to talk to each other. But the emphasis now is people are one-to-one more often, or on the phone one-to-one with the staff at Social Security, emphasising, please tell us everything. Tell us any circumstances that is changing, or even if it may be changing. If you want to move someone into your house, if you want to take a new job, if you want to do this, find out first, and then we will not have overpayments. And the system is actually improving, and has improved over the years. Thank you.
Constable St Peter.
Sir, would the Minister confirm if Social Security review cases of hardship where there have been overpayments? And I ask the question because I have a parishioner who is having deductions from something historic from many years ago and now faces great hardship. And that hardship is as a result of the deductions that are being made. And there should be a system. I mean, this particular person now has a muscle wasting disease, virtually unable to walk, and needs their full benefit paid for them. So could you confirm that they do review cases of hardship? Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So, and I think the constable, well, I mean, I really don't want to get into individual cases, but I would advise the constable to speak to Social Security with the person and make sure they are getting all the benefits, because it sounds like their health is deteriorating and they might need more benefits. Sir, there's negotiations on a daily basis of how much people can pay back or afford to pay back. It can be as £1 a day, £7 a week, or it's never normally more than £3 a day. Some people actually realise they've actually got more money than they should have got, and they haven't spent it, and they want to pay it back straight away. But I absolutely take where the constable is coming from, and literally, if he needs to talk to me about this case, not in the coffee room, but face to face, sir, I'd really like to hear about it. Thank you.
Constable St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I hope this doesn't move too far from the original question, but I had a parishioner who contacted me recently because he had been refused um, payments for being signed off with a medical condition, sick pay. And because he had not made enough contributions. And the minister mentioned her department speaking to each other, sir. He was refused this and therefore had no income of his own, contacted me. When I contacted the department, only when I contacted the department, did they then look to see whether he was entitled to income support. And they established that in fact he was. However, had he not contacted me, he would have been in the situation of having no income for himself. And I wonder why that is continuing to happen and how the minister can address it.
I thank the Constable for her question. These are obviously this case, and I don't know how recent it is. I mean, Customer and Local Services has been in full since October, November. We have more staff, we have people greeting at the desk, and I'm sorry that this case wasn't picked up, and I appreciate that the constituent had to contact the constable, so it was then picked up. Probably should have been advised down at Social Security that maybe he was entitled, and I don't know if he was in person there or he just sent in the sick note. He may have got a letter back saying you hadn't paid the contributions, and unfortunately, if there wasn't something to say, you may be entitled. I'm glad to hear that the case was resolved, but obviously ongoing, we should be more cross-referencing, and this is what apparently we are doing down at Customer and Local Services. Thank you.
The connoisseur was right that really she went too far in her question. The question is repayments, system repayments of overpayment, and not every social security matter that could be asked. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you. Mine relates to the rationale for the policy on overpayments. And does the Minister think that there are double standards being applied to the methodology for overpayments when the public sector workers demanding a year-on-year pay increase are told that we have no money, and that is considered to be a reasonable excuse for not giving a cost of living pay excuse, but yet when the poorest in our society who have been given an overpayment through no fault of their own say we have no money to pay you back, that's not considered a satisfactory excuse.
Well, surely, sir, this is a bit far from the original question, but I will answer it. We're not saying that these people don't have money. The deputy, like me, sir, lived in the real world one day, and he used to get paid. Sometimes 1 week you get more money, sometimes you do overtime. This is money that is not my money. It's unfortunate that because we pay in advance, I actually want to pay in advance. I would be loath to go down the universal credit system, which can wait for 4 to 6 weeks, and is really causing poverty in the UK. So, sir, if he wants to make me answer about the pay, I refuse, sir.
So may I ask a supplementary? Well, we're generally not speaking about short-term errors which relate to fluctuations. That is understandable. We know how the 3-month back payment system works for contributions, etc. But when there are years, in some cases, of overpayments which are not the fault of our constituents, and when they run up tens of thousands of pounds of back payments which are not their fault, would it not be a better outcome if the department said, when it's our error, after a certain period of time, if we haven't picked that error up, we won't expect you to repay that, and it might focus the minds of her officers in their department to work a bit more thoroughly?
Sir, I can assure the Deputy the officers in my department do work thoroughly. I've said we are improving things. The Deputy has just spoken about going back years and thousands of pounds, and he wants me, as public money, or to looking after public money, to write this off. I don't think £1 or £3 a day will put somebody into poverty who's had, in the Deputy's own words, thousands of pounds from the department that they weren't entitled to.
Final supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I think the key to this question is the historic nature of these payments. I would not want us to go down universal credit road, and that's not the point I'm making here. Small errors over changes over short periods of time, weeks and months, yes, I absolutely understand. But these are historic payments which could have been 5 or 6 years ago, and they're putting people into hardship. People who only have their pension to live on, and every time they get a pension increase, they don't see it, and they are stuck in a poverty trap right at the bottom of our income scale. And I think it would be sensible, and what I'm asking you to do is to review a point in time where we do write off these repayments, because that money was spent years ago. We can write off money from the Innovation Fund and all sorts of other areas of state spending, but when it comes to the poorest on our island, we are still claiming back, which may appear to be small amounts, but amounts that are significant to them. So can I ask, please, will you please consider taking a cut-off point? I'm quite happy to discuss, and I know we've discussed situations before, so that we can just simply help people to get out of this poverty trap.
Minister.
So I understand where the deputy is coming from. I'm not making a policy decision standing here, sir, to an answer. I don't know the cases specifically the deputy is talking about. And again, if he wants to bring them to my attention, I'm more than willing. But I can't stand here, sir, and say, oh, if this repayment is more than 4 years old, I'm not going to ask the people for their money. Again, sir, not my money. We need this money. There's a pot for benefits. It is rated, and people have had the money. So we're willing to speak to anybody who's got people who they feel are in hardship, but as I say, they are negotiated, and if the officer does see, I've seen cases, they've showed me, can go back to and only say some, even if they're old or they're only a week or two old, are paid at £1 a day. And other than that, the only way to rectify this is to make sure it's watertight, is to go down the universal credit and make it in arrears. Thank you, sir.
Come to question 2, which Deputy Mussell will ask of the Minister for Children and Housing.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister confirm that hard-to-reach children and young people have been included in the development of the Children and Young People's Plan, and if not, why not?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and thank the Deputy for this question. There is a slight difficulty here in that the term hard to reach doesn't have a precise definition or parameters which we use, so it's not exactly clear who does and doesn't fall within this term, and there is also a risk that the term can have a professional focus based on what services are able to do or not to do, as opposed to looking at it from the perspective of the child. But what I can say to the Deputy is that the level of engagement with children and young people throughout the process of putting the children's plan together, I think has been at an unprecedented scale compared to what we have done in the government previously, and we have worked with organisations outside of the government to try to engage with those children who don't necessarily engage directly with public services.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I understand that hard to reach was actually something that the communications section of the government does have a policy when it comes to hard to reach groups. But then more specifically then, can I ask the Minister, have children with special educational need from backgrounds where English isn't the first language and children in care, whether they have been included in the development of this plan?
So that is absolutely the case. There have been different engagement events throughout this process, but the most prominent and well-known one was on the 14th of March last year, where over 120 children and young people were included, and many of those children were involved in this process via organisations like the Inclusion Project with the Youth Service. There were children from Montalabe School who took part, and also there were children who are care experienced who were involved and who have played a very important role actually in helping us put together the Youth Connect project, which will help provide them a voice in future and is an essential part of us meeting our obligations, not just from the care inquiry report, but also the children's plan itself.
Deputy Wickington.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister please confirm if any consultation has occurred with the Education Minister, and if so, has the Education Minister given her backing, given the implications of the plan on her department?
So I'm sure that the Education Minister has been cited on the plan. This has been looked at by the whole Council of Ministers as well. But what I have to say is that the plan itself is a broad plan and doesn't specifically identify the detail of work streams. This is something that will feature across all departments, and the aspirations that we are attempting to meet through this will be not quite as detailed as, for example, some of the things that are going on with the improvement plan.
So, when the Minister says the Council Minister has been cited on it, does it mean that the plan is being done in isolation right now and that the consultation for the detail of a plan will come later?
Earlier, last week, we had the first meeting of the board that is providing oversight of the implementation of the children's plan. So the plan exists. It has not yet been published because there is still some work to do on putting our communication strategy for that plan together, and there is very heavy involvement of children and young people in that process, very specifically, as well as the process of putting the plan together itself. But the plan is about our broad aspirations for children and young people in the island, and we are going to have to refer back to it very consistently throughout the next few years when we're putting forward proposals from each government department, and we'll have to measure that up against the children's plan and work out if what we're proposing is in line with those aspirations.
One supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I wonder if the Minister could explain further, given that this is a broad plan and therefore will have implications for other departments, why the ministers, which will be therefore be responsible in the implementation of the plan once the broad term is agreed, haven't been included? Because how can you get an understanding about what you're going to deliver when those people who will be responsible for implementation won't necessarily have the political buy-in as this consultation is going on? Thank you, sir.
So the board that is put together to help us with the delivery of this plan has representations from across government departments. Of course, ministers will be heavily involved, not just in this, but in the government plan that we're putting together at the moment as well. So it's not a case of forcing aspirations onto other government departments and expecting them to get on with it without consultation. There will be very, I'm sure, robust discussions over the next few years, and there will often be disagreements about the best path to deliver the aspirations in this plan, but that's all healthy in our system. And it's not quite as simple as saying, here is the exact blueprint for every detail of decision. That's obviously something that will be subject to lots of discussions over the coming years.
Come to question 3, which Deputy Southern will ask of the Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister inform members of his policy position in respect of the ongoing dispute over public sector pay awards, and in particular, will he summarise the content of the meeting he had with the regional organiser of Unite the Union on the 4th of February 2019?
Chief Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. States Employment Board have directed officials to hold discussions with those unions that have not accepted the employers' pay offers for 2018-2019. Those talks are continuing. The SEB will be meeting on the 14th of February, that's Thursday, to receive feedback on how those discussions are progressing. And obviously, given the confidentiality of those discussions, it would not be right to comment on that point any further at this stage. In relation to my meetings, my meeting with the organisers from Unite, I could be very cheeky and say there was no I have no comments to make on the meeting of the 4th, sir, because it actually took place on the 5th. But anyway, on the Tuesday, sir, we did meet with the officials of Unite. They generally welcome the opportunity to meet face-to-face. As a rule, I do not comment on private meetings. But just to give a rate, there was also a broad-ranging discussion. It covered things like pay, government finances, and Brexit. It was made very clear it was not a negotiation in any shape or form, and basically it's inappropriate to comment any further, given that we are in the middle of a mediation process. Thanks, sir.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. At any stage in that meeting on the 5th, did the Chief Minister revert to his statement that there is no more money?
Sir, it'd be fair to say that we commented on the, as I said, we did comment on government finances and the pressures that we will be facing going forward, sir. It was also the point I think that needs to be made generally is that all parties can and should be working very hard for a settlement for the good of the island and its public services, but in order to achieve that, it is important that both parties try to resolve the matter jointly, which will mean that both sides having to change their public position. Obviously, there's mediation negotiations going on at the moment. We will have a further update on Thursday, sir.
Deputy Taylor.
Given the fact that the mantra more for less doesn't seem to be being accepted generally by the workforce, understandably, and is seen as derisory and treated with the contempt it deserves, would the Chief Minister try a new approach, which is less for less, i.e. we expect you to do less work for less money?
Is the Deputy advocating a pay cut, sir?
So what I'm saying is that the Chief Minister knows that there is a pay cut, because that's exactly what happens when the pay increases that are offered do not meet with the rate of inflation, and that's effectively what our public servants have been having for the last 10 years. So given the fact that public servants have had a pay cut for the last 10 years and that they're not willing to do more for less, should a different negotiating strategy be put forward, i.e. less for less?
I think the point I make, sir, is that all parties are generally committed to not making too many public comments whilst in the middle of negotiation. We will get an update on the state of those negotiations through the mediation process later this week, and at that point, sir, I'm reserving my comments until I know the outcome of those discussions, sir.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. May I ask the Chief Minister, does he consider that, given that we are facing public sector strikes across teachers, nurses, civil servants and beyond, is this becoming an emergency for the island?
Sir, we are all aware that there are certain groups that are unsettled with the general position. Part of that will be with the various organisational changes that are happening. Some of them are very long-standing grievances that are not just due with pay, and we are committed in certain areas to try and sort some of these matters out going forward. However, as I said, sir, given that we are in the middle of mediation and negotiations, and we'll have an update later this week, I'm not prepared to go too much further in commenting at this stage, because that's what we've generally agreed to do, sir.
Final supplementary.
Yes, sir. And for the sake of the widest possible communication around the position that we now have, will the Chief Minister accept an invitation from the activist group of Unite the Union locally to address their meeting in the near future?
So what's got to be quite clear is that it depends on the circumstances, depends on timing. I have agreed occasionally to meet, and we'll try and make it a bit more regular. The members of or representatives of the relevant unions that I have met so far, we'll try and do that more often. So I shall consider the detail if it comes through. It must always be clear it's not a negotiation process. And also, sir, that at the moment we are trying to maintain that balance of not commenting or not adding to matters whilst negotiations and mediation is taking place, sir.
Come to question 4, which Deputy Labby will ask of the Minister for Home Affairs.
What are the reasons for the time being taken to advertise for and employ a Chief Officer and Deputy Chief Officer of the States of Jersey Police?
Minister.
Thanks, sir. As the Deputy, I'm sure, knows, the Department is at the consultation stage on its target operating model. It was not sensible, therefore, to make substantial recruitments to the posts the Deputy mentions, whilst the work to develop the new structure was ongoing. Once the new structure has been confirmed, appropriate recruitment processes will be put in place, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Would he give a timeline on that? I think it's a moot point whether a permanent chief officer wouldn't have been advantageous during the consultation stage for this new model. And what we have at the moment is somebody dangling with all of the responsibility and none of the power. That's an intolerable position to be in, isn't it? Especially for a police chief.
Sir, I can confirm absolutely that the acting Deputy Chief is not dangling whatsoever. And I would commend him, sir, for the excellent work that he's done while being in this position of de facto Chief Police. He's done the work in an exemplary manner, well supported by his management team, sir. To answer the actual question that was asked, the target operating model is supposed to be, the plan is for it to be confirmed next month, after which the recruitment processes for the whole of the department, where appropriate, will take place, sir.
Deputy Wickington.
The States of Jersey Police Force Law 2012 states that the only person that can make changes to the organisation of the police is the Chief of Police. Therefore, what authority does the target operating model that's being proposed to the States of Jersey Police fall under? Which laws and powers give the right?
Sir, the police law is the overriding law for the management of the States of Jersey Police. It reinforces and it makes it absolutely clear the operational independence of the States of Jersey Police. And as the Deputy knows, we've had a number of correspondence and an exchange of emails on the issue. That independence is sacrosanct on operational matters. It is reinforced by the report of the Comptroller and Auditor General, which was published in the spring of last year. And I have committed that the recommendations made by the Comptroller and Auditor General will be put into place to reinforce the independence of the States of Jersey Police and the reporting lines to the Jersey Police Authority on which the deputy sits. Sir.
What's happening here is the target operating model is being created by the Minister's Department to then be put in place to the States of Jersey Police. Would not the right way of looking at it be to recruit the Chief Officer and the Deputy Chief Officer of the Police and ask them to then come up with the model of how they want their police force to look as the law states?
Sir, the target operating model is not exclusively about the States of Jersey Police. It is about all the services that are provided by Home Affairs, including customs, fire, and indeed ambulance as well. And it's important there is coordination, cooperation, and understanding among all of those services, not just one of them, sir.
Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister assure this Assembly, or give assurances to this Assembly, that any legislative changes needed in order to implement the target operating model are passed by this Assembly in advance of the model being implemented itself?
Sir, it should go without saying that any legislative changes which are necessary to implement the preferred model or the appropriate model will come before this Assembly, and clearly any changes which rely on law cannot be implemented until the legislative changes have been agreed, sir.
Final supplementary.
The model might be broad, but it includes the police, and a police chief could inform the model. When will he appoint a chief officer of the Jersey Police Force?
Sir, I've already answered that question, sir, and of course the States of Jersey Police are, and the acting chief officer, whom I've got absolute confidence in, and I'm sure this Assembly has too, is making his full contribution as to the appropriate model for the entire Home Affairs family, sir.
On to question 5, which the Constable St Helier will ask of the Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister explain what monitoring and reporting of air quality is carried out, especially on busy roads and in the vicinity of schools?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. There are two different methods of air quality monitoring which are used by our environmental health team. The first is passive air quality monitoring, which is carried out in over 23 locations across the island where air quality is thought to be worst. Two of these are near a school. The results don't give us a real-time update. They give us the results for a month. They don't give us peaks and troughs of that analysis, but they are important. The second method is near real-time air quality monitoring, which is carried out in two locations. One of those is in the Central Market, where traffic is heavy and often at a standstill, and at Howard Davis Park. And those results and the real-time results are published on the gov.je website, so people can see how the variations happen in conditions of traffic and other factors. These, in relation to schools, the environmental health team, also with the ECHO Active and education officers, do
incredible work working together with schools to develop an air quality education package to schools to enable to them to understand the air quality around their schools and understand the air quality and pollution issues. And that's a voluntary scheme, and the schools that participate will be able to monitor their air quality. This project is due to launch in June to coincide with the Clean Air Day, which is a national initiative in many locations throughout the UK.
Thank you. So I thank the Minister for his comprehensive answer. Is he satisfied that only 2 real-time locations are going on, and certainly none of those appears to me to be in the critical areas around the main schools where traffic, as members know and the public knows, is backed up at school-run times, particularly Montmilley, College Hill and Wellington Hill in particular, where the air quality is noticeably bad if one is walking rather than driving one's car. Will he undertake to see if we can improve the number of locations where real-time monitoring is taking place, as a lot of European towns and cities are?
Yes, I share the Constable's concern. I think our environmental health team have taken the lead on this work in Jersey and been very proactive in it. And I think it's not that long been assigned to the Environment Minister. But I certainly, the real-time monitoring is obviously more expensive, more sophisticated, and I certainly would like to see that extended. At the moment, the techniques pick up both the oxides of nitrogen, also any particulates and so on. But I absolutely agree with him that I think we need to do more. And in fact, it's essential, I believe, that we need more and more evidence of what is, I believe, a serious problem. Having said that, thankfully, the quality of air in Jersey is very good. But unfortunately, we do have these hotspots of traffic-based pollution. And of course, children, being at a lower level, are much more affected by these contaminants from vehicles.
Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. The Minister almost answered my question, but how would, having said that Jersey's air quality overall is very good, how would the Minister describe, having looked at the results, how would the Minister describe the quality of air in these hotspots near schools as a general overarching kind of comment?
Yes, this is difficult. I think we all know that the air quality changes according to the weather, indeed, whether we're in still air and in the locations, and it's very, very variable. And so, thankfully, if one stood on the northwest coast of St. Juan, one gets some of the finest air quality probably in the world. But unfortunately, if you're living in the streets of town, in the bowl of St. Helier, when there is a temperature inversion and you get accumulations, it is poor. And in fact, there was an answer, I think, I refer the Deputy to the written answer that was given to Deputy Terrier by myself on the 9th of October 2018, in particular in relating to the tunnel, where there's no question, there is very poor air quality in that particular location. But it's something that I want to do more about, and I think the answer is, let's do something about vehicles.
Deputy Terrier.
Thank you, sir. Looking at the government website for his department, it currently states that at Howard Davis Park, the monitoring unit is undergoing essential repairs and will be reinstated as soon as possible. So it seems that we only have one live monitoring going on in Jersey at the moment. Does the Minister know why that particular device is out of action, when it became out of action, and when we can expect it to be back online?
I thank the Deputy for his alertness. I should have realised that members, of course, could check the website from in here. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was down. I think I'm very disappointed to hear that, and I will undertake to find out the answers to the Deputy question and get this sorted out.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask the Minister to confirm that things such as carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, low-level ozone, which are really dangerous for children, particularly if you're asthmatic, and other solid particulate levels are measured within particularly the centre of St Helier, and to be monitored. Otherwise, we cannot give health risk updates and emergency situations, such as in the middle of summer when temperature makes such a difference to the air quality in that area?
I think I do have a basic scientific understanding, but I'm sure the Deputy has got considerable more scientific understanding than me. The information I've got is that particular ones where monitoring takes place are the oxides of nitrogen and indeed the particulates, which I think PM 2.5 or something, which is a very, very small particle of solid matter, which is the things that gets in people's lungs and causes that serious damage, and those things are emitted by diesel vehicles. The other things, yes, they do cause health aspects. I think in time there is a thing called an air quality strategy, and there are times generally, there are matters generally, for example, the presence of radon gas within dwellings. No question, radon gas obviously is an air quality issue, and that does cause health hazards. I think what I'd like to do in answer to the question is promise to come back to the Deputy with a more thorough analysis of the air pollution issues for him and circulate it to members if they wish.
Final supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The previous minister of the then titled DFI department admitted to the States that we have failed, and his department has failed to meet its traffic reduction targets as set out in the last policy. We have no recent policy or strategy to reduce traffic. Effectively, we're operating, if he will excuse the pun, in a vacuum. Will the minister undertake to get his fellow minister at the department now called GHE to prioritise this matter, which clearly does affect people's health, particularly if we're trying to get more children to walk and cycle to school?
Yes, this is absolutely one of my priorities. I suppose the Constable says it's under our current organisation. I don't have that direct responsibility. For example, when I met with Guernsey, the environment president of their committee, I was asked, what are our air standards, traffic air standards? Are we going to set a limit or a date by which we will end pollution from diesel vehicles? I'd say, well, I don't have that responsibility. And I know, of course, throughout Europe, other towns are doing so. They're setting very, very clear targets. Now, that sort of thing, I'm hoping, will come out of the work that the Council of Ministers are doing under the Common Strategic Plan. And I'm pleased to say that the Minister for Infrastructure and I are both working on that group. And the officers now are not in the gift of myself or the Infrastructure Minister. We're working cross-government. And I am very hopeful that because there is a strong conviction that this is something we have to address in the timescale of this States. And I make that commitment. I would do my best.
We come to question 6, which Deputy Moreau will ask of the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture.
Thank you, sir. Following last year's publication of a strategic review by BOP Consulting into Jersey's culture, arts and heritage, has the Minister decided to accept any of the report's recommendations, and if so, which ones?
Thank you, sir. Deputy Ted.
Thanks. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Minister. I would like to thank the Deputy for his question. Like him, I am very keen to make sure that culture, arts and heritage are well supported, and I'm keen to make sure that the recommendations which have merit are not just accepted, but that they're acted upon. I'm inclined to accept all the recommendations in principle. Some thought will need to be given to the manner in which a number of the recommendations are implemented. I'm also minded that a number of the recommendations require cross-governmental approach to implement them properly. It may be helpful to tell the Deputy that some of the recommendations are already being done, one of which I could cite is Recommendation 8, which asks to make culture, arts and heritage more visible through key events and anniversaries. So, for example, this year we have the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, which is being enacted upon by the GREF and the Jersey Archive and other civil society groups. Liberation 75, of course, next year, but I've already had meetings to try and commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Corn Riots, which will take place in September. Very big anniversary, very significant which of course gave rise to the democratic changes which we now enjoy in Jersey. So some of the recommendations are perhaps more simple and immediate to be acted upon.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. No, that's no supplementary.
Deputy Penton.
Thank you, sir. This seems like an opportune moment for members to congratulate Jersey-born Michael Pearce for his outstanding debut BAFTA win at the weekend. This Jersey-born resident has gone on to achieve great things already in his short career and will go on, I'm sure, to do more to represent the island in his field. Does the Assistant Minister agree with me that this is an opportune moment for the island and the department to look at investment in the terms of movie making and the availability of funds to those who want to continue and be inspired by Michael's success?
Okay, yeah, I'd like to join the Deputy in his very eloquent words. I don't need to reiterate them, but yeah, I do share his sentiment. And I know the Minister for the Department has already commented on this yesterday. So I fully agree, and that's why when considering the bid that was put forward by Art House Jersey to develop their commercial arm of their operations, we were very pleased to support that. That will enable actually more of these things to be coming forward in future for them to provide seed funding and support for these kind of initiatives. And we'd like to see a lot more of that in Jersey. And I'm keen to make sure that all of the cultural organisations that exist in Jersey, whatever their specific remit, are actually sufficiently funded in the same way. But a very good example of how some investment and some encouragement can actually lead to great success, very visibly in this case on the international stage.
Deputy Lally.
Does the Assistant Minister think that the Arts Centre and the Opera House are funded to an acceptable level as compared with similar organisations, say, in the UK, given that operating here is more expensive in terms of taking in tours because of the stretch of water?
I thank the Deputy for that question. It is very pertinent because whilst we know that one of the bids that was put into Treasury was accepted, the other two are still pending, and the longer that they pend, of course, if that's the correct word, one tends to think that they may not be accepted. I've been in talks directly with the Arts Centre to make sure that we as a department can support them, and I've made it very clear robustly to my officers, and I hope that the Treasury Minister will also be listening, that if monies are not available very soon for the likes of the Arts Centre, which are suffering from both capital expenditure needs and operating expenditure, they've seen pay freezes in their grants for years on years, and it's come to the point where it's really going to affect their operating model, and I wouldn't want to see any reduction in their artistic programme. So I would hope that if that these things can be done at a departmental level, talking with the Treasury, but if not, I certainly have told the department I'll be prepared to come to the States Assembly to ask for more money, perhaps take it from the Chief Minister's budget, but I hope it doesn't come to that, because I think conversations can be had, and we should all be supporting the arts across the piece, not just in words, but actually by giving them appropriate funding.
Thank you, sir. If the department ventures into movies again, can we have assurances that the lessons that were learned from the previous foray will actually be noted and the correct protocols, controls and balances, checks and controls will be applied?
Thank you. I'm now on the other side of the table, and I can assure the Senator, with a very good question, that as far as I can see, the lessons have very much been learnt. I think the clue is in the name, can be done. I think somebody certainly did get done on that one. But nonetheless, we do need to be a can-do government, and there is a risk that we can become too risk-averse, because there are very good ideas out there which do need some sort of level of support from government. It may be funding, it may just be encouragement or things that we can do for the industry, because it is an industry as well as a sector. And I think the lesson has been learnt, but let's not be too risk-averse when it comes to investment either.
Final supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Just wanted to get the Minister's view on the second recommendation in the BOP report, which is about improving the integration of culture, arts and heritage with skills and education. I was wondering whether work has already begun on this? And if so, is the minister's, the assistant minister's view that culture, arts and heritage should have similar standing to sciences or the STEM subjects in our education system?
Very much so. I think that sometimes, almost derogatorily, these are termed as the soft skills, but they're very much the important skills. What we've seen is that students who either entirely or partly as part of their ongoing studies focus on the arts, whether it's music, performing arts, or the plastic arts, find that it gives them confidence, it allows them to think in different ways, and especially when they're able to go away and get experience and perhaps come back to the island, it's very important, and I think that's also appreciated by employers. So very much so. I think there is a bigger piece of work that can be done between our department and education, because clearly culture sits very much between the two, and there will be an overlap that needs to be bridged in those two departments.
We come to question 7, which Deputy Ash will ask of the Chairman of the Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel.
Thank you, sir. In the light of the news that 41 students from Brampton Manor Academy, a comprehensive in Newham, East London, obtained places at Oxford or Cambridge, will the panel undertake an inquiry into how the islands schools compare in this matter?
Chairman.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'd like to thank the Deputy for the question. It's nice to see scrutiny being recognised for the importance of the work it does and carries out, and it's important as a component for the governance of this island. The panel is not looking to undertake a specific review into this, the number of students from Jersey schools who go to Oxford and Cambridge. This is mainly because the question itself can be answered by requesting the relevant figures from the Minister of Education about how many students go from Jersey and study at both of these universities. As such, it's a very narrow scrutiny topic. We can ask the question of scrutiny of a panel for the Deputy, or I can talk to him about the wording if that helps. The wider issue of comparison with this particular school will be difficult, given that Jersey does not have one single non-fee paying or non-selective school that covers the complete years 7 to 13 range. Although I did find out that the school the Deputy mentioned takes 300 students from around 3,000 applications in its sixth form, so it could be said to be selective itself. I do not think the scrutiny is here to look at a single indicator of performance at any individual school. We need to look at the provision as a whole, trying to address specific areas that can produce constructive outcomes. The Deputy may be aware that the panel is currently conducting a review of post-16 education, which is looking at all provision available to young people once they've finished compulsory education at the age of 16. This review will look to establish the pathways and opportunities for young people for which they can enter higher education and employment, and whether what is available meets the needs of all students in the island. This much wider review is more appropriate for scrutiny. The review will also look at what is available to students in other countries, including but not limited to the United Kingdom. We're currently carrying out a survey of local students which runs until the 1st of March.
Chairman, there's a 90-second rule for answers.
Sorry. Can I just take one liberty to thank the work of scrutiny officers who did superb work and make my concerns about the funding of scrutiny now and into the future.
Supplementary.
I thank the Chairman for his answer, sir. In the past, Oxbridge entry was very much the preserve of the public schools. And the entry requirement could be difficult to assess. It was once said, I think, to get into Teddy Hall at Oxford, you were passed a rugby ball. If you caught it, you got in. If you drop-kicked it back, you got a scholarship. But those days have changed now. It's very much a meritocracy. And would the Chairman feel, as part of putting children first, it is very much our job to allow the brightest children the very best chance of entering these institutions?
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's difficult to know how to answer this as a scrutiny chair rather than just a member, but I would suggest that Oxbridge is not the only indicator of success where our students go. And we have to be really careful with narrow indicators and narrow pathways. What we need to ensure in our education system is that we are not stopping entry to any university if that's what student wants. The move forward in funding in university education, I think, has helped with this, in particular from those from low incomes, because the financial barriers are one of the greatest barriers to young people going to university. In terms of the academic achievement, I would suggest that, yes, we are addressing that with the post-16 review to see the provision that we have across the board. And it's not just about Oxford and Cambridge. Yeah.
Deputy Levy.
Did we gather from the first answer of the chairman that scrutiny are going to look at whether it's right for a child to have to sit an entrance exam to get into one of the private schools which is subsidised by public?
Well, that's a very good question. We have a pathway, if you like, through what we're going to take on in scrutiny, and that would certainly be an interesting issue for us to look at. There are a number of legacy issues that we want to deal with as well, recruitment and retention, and also the Home Affairs. And I must take this opportunity to say we are limited by the resources that we have in scrutiny. We have one scrutiny officer for the panel who works incredibly hard, and I know other scrutiny panels are in the same position. So yes, we would love to undertake all of these, but we will be limited by the resourcing that's available.
Supplementary. Oh, sorry, Senator Wilson. Didn't see that.
Thank you, sir. The Auditor General in the UK has commented that advice available to students, and in my experience, careers advice as well, is less than optimal for students. Is the scrutiny panel including the careers advice available to our students as well in its review?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, we have taken a submission from Skills Jersey who look at careers advice. And some of the questions that are going out to students, about 1,000 students actually, will be how much they know about their pathways. So yes, we are addressing that issue, but as part of a wider context. And again, with scrutiny, we have to have it's a balance between a wide investigation into the number of factors that will affect outcomes in the long term and specifics within that. So I think we have got that balance, yes.
Deputy Taddy.
Does the scrutiny chairman believe that there may well be professionals and teachers out there listening to this question in a quite bemused manner when they have pupils coming to school who perhaps haven't had breakfast, who have got no lunch money, who may be struggling with literacy and with difficult home situations, to face potential comparisons with a highly selective school in the UK, which is sending students to what is still a very elitist system? Does he think that might send the wrong message out, and that if in fact the deputy who's asking the question wishes to find out a comparison, there's no need for a scrutiny review, simply he needs to ask the education department for the figures and he can make his own comparisons?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, again, answering as a scrutiny chairman is going to be a difficult one. I'll refer you back to something I said when I answered the original question. We need to look at the provision as a whole, trying to address specific areas that produce constructive outcomes. And I think that's what we do in scrutiny. Yes, we have an issue across our island and across many other jurisdictions about access to education that is way beyond just a few exclusive universities. That goes right back to day one in schools in terms of children being able to have the right sort of standards of living. And that, to me, is what's putting children first, so that we give genuine access to the education that they want and that we need. We don't need everyone to go to Oxbridge. We need people to be nurses and teachers and professionals in all sorts of ways on our island if we're going to function as a society. So we need to look at the widest possible scrutiny of our education system.
Deputy Young.
So in congratulating the panel chairman on their review of what seems to be the educational opportunities for our young people, could the chairman comment on whether or not the current system of 14+ selection is a factor that needs to be considered as part of such a review, and whether that has any bearing on their people's achievements?
Thank you, sir. There is something called the scoping documents. You have to be very careful that we stay within the scoping documents to get the outcomes and recommendations for the actual scrutiny we're undertaking. And we have said post-16 scrutiny. Yes, the 14+ transfer is an issue in our education system. Does that allow genuine access post-16? Does it get in the way of that? That's something that will be considered, but I think that's something for later. It will touch on to this post-16 review, and I'd be very interested to see what you think about the recommendations and the outcomes of that review. So yes, all of these factors will impinge upon that review, but we are focusing on what happens post-16 across the island as well. all of its post-16 with provision.
The question was about Oxbridge entry, and the questions are now going wider and wider and wider. They're going to come back again shortly. I hope. Connie Talbot, St Saviour.
My question won't be answered in that case, sir. Thank you.
Final supplementary? No. Thank you very much. We come to question 8, which Deputy Higgins will ask of the Chairman of the SCB. States Employment Board.
Thank you, sir. Is it the Chairman's assessment that the officer's advice given throughout the Al-Witri case to the States Employment Board was correct and was not affected by any personal views they may have held?
Yes, sir. The Deputy Assistant Warren is answering this question, sir.
Conor.
So I think the Chief Minister meant the explicit ones. My apologies to the Deputy. I think I thank the Deputy for this question. The Chair is satisfied that officer's advice to the SEB was correct and was not affected by any personal views that they held for the following reasons. As advised by officials, the SEB commissioned 3 independent reports by Beale Haste and the former SG, Howard Sharp, so there's not a simple acceptance by the SEB of the hospital management's views. No officer is criticising the judgment for incorrect advice or providing advice that was affected by personal views. On the contrary, having heard live evidence at the trial of 6 senior managers and clinicians from the hospital, the court found that the hospital management had acted in good faith in the best long-term interests of the hospital. The court also found that Mr Al-Witri was not dismissed for raising patient safety concerns or because he was a whistleblower. Mr Al-Witri abandoned his claim that there was a torturous conspiracy amongst senior managers in the hospital. He also abandoned his claims in defamation, and his claim for punitive exemplary damages were dismissed by the Royal Court. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
If that is the case, why did the Royal Court find in Mr Al-Witri's favour?
Sorry, sir. I just wasn't quite the supplementary I was expecting because the Deputy had sent me a supplementary before, but he's clearly changed his mind, which is fine. Obviously, seeing if I'm awake. I just preface this by saying the Al-Witri case is sub judice in 2 respects. Firstly, the judgment of the Royal Court handed down last work is being appealed to the Court of Appeal. Second, the judgment of the Royal Court was in respect of liability only, and did not deal with the quantum, the amount of damages which will be the subject of further proceedings. So at this juncture, I'd like to ask the SG whether I can actually respond to that question.
It's not really a matter for the Solicitor General, but it's not going to cause any difficulty for you.
Well, I think, sir, the answer is, well, the Deputy Higgins can read the judgment. I mean, the reasons are set out in the judgment.
With respect, sir, I was asking the Minister because he gave an answer which tried to sort of confuse people's views as to the actual judgment. So what I'm trying to say is, why did the Royal Court rule in favour of Mr Witry, which is now the subject of an appeal from the SEB?
Well,
simple question.
Deputy, my reaction to that was that the reason for the Royal Court's judgment is in the public domain. I'm not sure the Minister in any event can speak for the Royal Court. The Royal Court says what it thinks through its judgment, and if you wish to know the answer to why the Royal Court thought the way it did, then the Solicitor General's comment, read the judgment, is the right answer.
I have, sir, but other members may not have.
Well, it's up to them. Even in this free society that we have, we can't make people read things. Deputy Lally.
So I'd just like to say that I think some of what the Assistant Chief Minister has just read out is highly selective, one-sided and inadvisable. I would ask, the world of the hospital consultant is a small world. Is there evidence to suggest that the Al-Witri case is doing harm to recruitment of at the hospital, and isn't an appeal just prolonging that agony and making things worse?
I'm slightly struggling with this answer, but as far as I'm aware, the outcome of the Al-Witri judgment is not having an impact on recruitment of further consultants. I'm not sure about answering the second part of the question, and perhaps the SG might like to guide me in that respect.
As far as I understand it, no appeal has yet been entered. So while it is still possible for an appeal to be entered, the time has not expired, but it's difficult to say that the matter is sub judice because the case is not going anywhere as far as liability is concerned because no appeal has been entered. Of course, if the question were to go into the amount of damages, that would be a completely different issue, and therefore that would be out of order as potentially affecting the court case.
Thank you for that clarification. If I could just ask the Deputy to repeat the second part of his question, that would be helpful.
Isn't appealing the decision, the recent decision, prolonging the agony, futile and waste of public funds?
In the opinion of the State's Employment Board, the answer to that is no. We feel that we have a good case to appeal it, and that we feel we disagree with the judgment of the court, and that's the basis of our appeal, is that we are unhappy with the outcome, which is why we will be submitting an appeal.
Deputy?
So is the spokesman for the State's Employment Board aware of the posts on social media that show this case being circulated by the British Medical Association? And does he not think that such a case, and in great detail, would reflect well on the island?
Yes, I thank the Deputy for his comments. I'm afraid I try not to follow social media. The repetition of these comments throughout outside of the island is unfortunate and is potentially damaging, but nevertheless we do feel we've got a strong case, and as such we have been advised that an appeal has a good chance of success, and we feel it's right to do so.
In order to convince the Assembly that an appeal is the best course of action and is in the public interest, would the Assistant Chief Minister be able to say what likelihood of success he expects for the appeal versus the potential cost that would be incurred if it loses?
I thank the Deputy for his question. As I'm sure he'll understand, any matter that goes to court is never an absolute certainty. But we have been advised by our legal advisors that we have a good case and that we have every prospect of being successful. In relation to the costs, whilst I can't comment specifically, there certainly would be substantially less than any potential award that might be awarded against us.
Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Does the Assistant Chief Minister not think that sacking somebody a week before they start work is grossly unfair and not the sort of opinion, not the sort of example that this island wishes to set in its employment of people? And does he not realise that there is a time when discretion is the better part of valour, and that this thing is put to bed properly, and having ruined somebody's career, we try and make some sort of amends?
I think all I can say in response to that question is that that is one side of the argument, which I accept the Senator holds as an opinion. Clearly the SEB have looked at both sides of the argument and feel that an appeal is a worthwhile and right way to go forward.
Deputy Moran.
Thank you, sir. Given that that SEB has been found to be wrong once already, if the SEB were to appeal and were to lose that appeal, then hence being found wrong twice, would the Assistant Chief Minister agree that therefore his position would no longer be tenable on the State's Employment? In fact, the State's Employment Board, the positions there would no longer be tenable, having been proven twice wrong.
I think the answer to that is no. I would not see our position as being untenable. We are following legal advice for a case that we inherited from the previous SEB. We feel it's the right way forward, but as with all legal advice, there's no guarantee that we're going to be successful, and we are putting the best interests, we feel, of the states first and pursuing this appeal.
Final supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Can the Constable tell the states how much has been spent to date on the pursuit of this claim? It hasn't gone to appeal yet, so therefore I just want to know what the costs have been to the states to this point in time.
You don't mean on the pursuit of the claim, because that's what Dr. Al-Witri has spent money on. You mean on the defence of the claim?
On the defence of the claim, sir. Yes, I stand corrected.
Contact.
Yeah. Can I just check that the SG is happy for me to answer that question?
So I think part of those costs would be in relation to the claim generally, and they would include, for example, quantum of damages, which is still an ongoing issue. So as I understood it, you made a distinction between the appeal and then the ongoing claim as regards quantum in relation to whether or not this question was sub judice. So
I understood the Deputy's question to relate to costs and not the liability and damages.
That is correct, sir. Thank you.
Well, in that case, I'm not sure whether the constable has the information, but to the extent he has the information, then...
Very well. Constable.
Yes, I'm afraid I don't have the information, and I'm more than happy to supply the Deputy with it after the sitting.
So if I could say, I gave the constable advance notice for the question I was going to be asking about costs. I'm disappointed he hasn't got them available, and I hope he'll publish them to all members and to the public.
So, can I raise a point of order? It sets a strange precedent when someone who's being questioned asks the permission from the law officer, Crown officer, to ask whether he can answer the question. I understand what's going on, but it sets a strange precedent, given the fact that in the future we may not have an SG or AG at the time. And it's also strange that a minister asks permission to answer a question, and when he is given permission, he says, actually, I don't have the information.
Deputy, I think your point of order is really a rebuke of me and the chair, and it's right, because I should not have allowed the reference to the Solicitor General. Either it breaches standing orders, which is a matter for the chair, or not. And I think probably I shouldn't have done so, and I accept that. And
so it's not, the word rebuke is far too strong. I just want a clarification, but thank you for that.
I've just said I think I shouldn't have done that. It was the most delightfully rendered rebuke, if I may say so. We come to question 9, which Deputy Pamplin will ask of the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, sir. Given a number of sites could physically accommodate a new hospital, albeit they would each come with their own considerations in respect of the environmental impact, is it the Minister's assessment that a mechanism will need to be found to allow for construction to proceed on any site, despite what is contained in the island plan? And if so, how can that be achieved?
Minister.
I thank the Deputy for his question, a matter that we spoke about at length in the written scrutiny hearing. The planning and building law adopts a plan-led system whereby development which is in accordance with the island plan will be permitted. And a mechanism already exists to allow the decision maker, whoever they are, to depart from the provisions of the island plan if there is, quote, sufficient justification to do so. Unfortunately, what constitutes sufficient justification is not defined, but I absolutely agree that providing a much-needed new hospital could provide such a public interest justification. And as Minister, recently I had to make that difficult judgment, whether to override the planning harm and the contraventions reported by the planning inspector under the present law or otherwise. Now, I considered whether a change in the law would provide an improved process, such as bringing a special law like Queen's Valley or a fast-track amendment to the island plan for major public infrastructure. But on advice and a lot of thought, these changes would not improve upon the present process nor speed it up. And so where I am on this at the moment is I'm of the opinion that achieving our much-needed new hospital as soon as possible will be helped or enabled by our adopting an open, transparent process of public and stakeholder engagement before the next planning application is lodged on whatever site is decided, as is routine for such projects in other jurisdictions.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the Deputy for his answer. Will the Deputy elaborate on the impact of the environmental ecological studies that are needed in such a plan of this size and his importance of them?
The question is about mechanisms for getting around the island plan. And I'm not sure that supplementary really is related to the question. Unless you can reformulate it to draw it to the question, which is about mechanisms for assessing environmental impact.
Yes, sir. No, I totally take your point. I was just rewording it in my head as you were speaking it. If he can answer in relation to the question then of the island plan and the law that it requires the impact of the island plan with the decision making, but how important the environmental considerations are in his decision making.
Minister.
Yes, as well as as part of the suite of legislation of the planning building law, we do have a subordinate legislation on the requirement for an environmental impact assessment to be carried out and produced by the applicant as part of the inquiry, part of the application. The scope of that environmental impact is dependent upon the characteristics of the site. In some circumstances, it would be ecological impact, as the Deputy referred to, but in other cases, it would be the impact on traffic, on general pollution levels, and so on. So what we don't have in Jersey that other jurisdictions have is a very much more sophisticated subordinate legislation defining in greater detail on what is what's the content of an environmental impact is required, but there's no question what we do have is a requirement for an environmental impact assessment on a project of this size. I forget what the threshold is of size, but this project clearly does require it. And I think that will be so under any procedure. What I was addressing in my answer was how we could get to the answer quicker. And I personally wouldn't be convinced that the answer is in shortcutting the process at the planning application stage. I think myself, my experience has always been, the more attention to that is paid pre-application to get it right, the more the process downstream of the application and its approval goes smoothly, because there you save the time there. So that's my thoughts. But I'm open to views of others. I've said this is my current thinking.
Final supplementary? No, thank you very much. We come to question 10, which Deputy Pamplin will ask of the Minister for Infrastructure.
Thank you, sir. Further to engagement I've had with some concerned islanders, will the Minister confirm what law and policies, if any, are in place in relation to the covering of lorries transporting loose loads from building sites?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I can confirm, sir, that yes, there is legislation in place that prevents unsafe load from being carried on our roads. Article 106(2), maintenance and use of vehicles so as not to be a danger of the Motor Vehicle Construction and Use Jersey Order 1998 under Section F, avoidance of danger, states that the load carried by a motor vehicle or trailer shall at all times be so secured, if necessary, by physical restraint other than its own weight, and be in such a position that neither danger nor nuisance is likely to be caused to any person or property by reason of the load or any part thereof falling or being blown from the vehicle, or by reason of any other movement of the load or any part thereof in relation to the vehicle. Thanks, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Minister for his answer. If that is the case, then, following my engagement with the concerned islanders, I spent some time going around the island and noticing that this obviously wasn't in place in certain sites where I witnessed large loads of dust-contaminated vehicles not covered up. In the instance of a former question earlier today about the environment and air pollution, will the Minister advise how this could be followed up and regulated further?
Sir, the driver and vehicle standards, in association with both the Honorary and States Police, I believe organise approximately 30 road checks per year. Any vehicle stopped will be immediately impounded if the load is unsafe or unsecured until such times as that can be remedied. People carrying an unsafe load or causing any severe damage or even injury to another person would be liable, I believe, to a fine up to £5,000. So that when these vehicles are caught, if they're in a dangerous condition or carrying a dangerous load, they are pulled over, sir.
Tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Road checks are one thing, but there is a certain random nature to road checks. It strikes me that if the department wanted to police lorries and their loads more effectively, actually visiting construction sites or similar would be more effective. Does the Minister agree with this, and would the Minister take that forward to see whether his department would in fact start targeting construction sites for such observation?
That is actually being carried out, sir, and there are leaflets that are given to lorry drivers explaining the law to them and the dangers therein of having an unsecured or unsafe load, sir. That, as I say, many vehicles are pulled over. There are regular checks. I was at a road check just the other day, and vehicles are indeed pulled over.
Final supplementary. Here we come to question 11, which Deputy Higgins will ask of the Solicitor General.
Thank you, sir. Will Her Majesty's, well, it was addressed to the Attorney General, but the Solicitor General, inform members how many cases are currently lodged against the States of Jersey claiming damages, for what type of action, and the quantity of any damages currently being sought?
Solicitor General.
So I've taken this question to refer to the number of claims for damages where legal proceedings have been commenced in court, given that the question refers to claims lodged. I would also add that it should be noted that claims for damages are brought against individual ministers or against the State's Employment Board rather than the States of Jersey as a defendant. And so there are currently 9 claims where proceedings have been commenced claiming damages against ministers or the SEB. As regards the type of action, 1 claim is for damages for wrongful dismissal against the SEB, and 6 claims are against the Minister for Health and Social Services, which are mainly claims for clinical negligence. And then, so lastly, there are 2 other claims for damages against the SEB and other defendants, which have been both brought by the same plaintiff, and those claims are for financial loss for defamation and misfeasance in public office, amongst other claims. As regards the quantity, a draft schedule has been a draft schedule of loss has been provided for the claim for wrongful dismissal, which claims damages of £8 million plus interest and costs. In relation to the other 8 claims, schedules of loss have not yet been provided in relation to these claims, so the damages cannot be quantified. Lastly, I would add that this information does not include claims in the Employment Tribunal for unfair dismissal and discrimination, as technically such claims are not claims for damages, which are determined by the court, but are claims for awards of compensation limited by employment legislation and determined by the Employment Tribunal. But I can give the Deputy that information if he wishes.
Yes, please.
So there are a total of 6 claims for compensation against the State's Employment Board in the Employment Tribunal, 2 of those for unfair dismissal and 4 for discrimination, and the total exposure to those claims is approximately £77,000.
Final supplementary.
No, sir. I thank the SG for the information. I'll be coming back, no doubt.
Thank you. Come to question 12, which the Constable St Helier will ask of the Minister for Infrastructure.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister update the Assembly on the steps being taken to repurpose a site vacated by the States of Jersey Police?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The yard is used by the fire service, who have also taken on a small element of the old police station. There are currently no plans to move the fire service elsewhere. The old police headquarters building is empty and in the process of being decommissioned as it is unfit for occupation or any use. This is a valuable site in St Helier and there is keen competition for it to be allocated for a variety of uses. These will be considered and a suitability and costs of use put forward. And the Assembly will, of course, be updated, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I'm disappointed that we seem to have moved backwards from the time this was last raised in the States by former Deputy Lewis of St Helier. Can I remind the Minister and ask him, will he confirm that among possible reuses for the site were more space for Rouge Bouillon Primary School, more amenity space for town residents who have very little access to open space in the area of Rouge Bouillon, and more parking so that some people who currently drive into town can park and walk, and for residents to have more parking spaces. So will he, sir, if he cannot explain now, will he undertake to investigate those three quite valid priorities for the use of the space and to come back to the Assembly in a short period of time?
Minister.
Sir, the site is partially listed, sir. The central fire station is the old arsenal. The remainder of the site is obsolete and in disrepair, as is in the process of being shut down and boarded up to prevent unauthorised access and vandalism. With a suitable investment, it's believed the site could accommodate a combined fire and ambulance centre and would deliver efficiencies to our colleagues at Home Affairs, freeing up the existing ambulance centre for development. No formal work has been commissioned to resolve this. Interest has also been expressed in the site as an extension for Rouge Bouillon School. I believe it answers the Constable's question. No formal work has been commissioned to determine the requirements or costs. This site could also be considered for disposal or development in the context of the Office Modernisation Programme. Okay, thank you, sir.
Deputy Masson.
Thank you, sir. The Constable did ask my question, but with my education hat on, can I please reassert to the Minister the Education Department's keen interest in the site for the expansion of Rouge Bouillon School, and if there hasn't been a feasibility study by the Department, will the Minister meet with the Education Minister in order to discuss and progress that particular matter?
Yes, sir. As I've just mentioned, there's interest has been expressed as an extension to Rouge Bouillon School, sir, and more than happy to pull that one forward.
And a supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Well, I'm a little bit dismayed by the prepared answer nature that the Minister has read out. He hasn't actually given me an undertaking that he will come back to the Assembly with any timescale to comment on the need for more amenity space and more parking in the area of Rouge Bouillon. I'd like to hear that from him. And I would like to ask him whether he agrees with me that 15 years to repurpose the former JCG building should not be his target with repurposing the former States of Jersey Police Headquarters.
Indeed, sir, two totally separate cases. No intention of waiting 15 years or anything like it, sir. So the building's now vacated. Parts of the building are being used by the fire service. The rest of the building will be repurposed or otherwise disposed of, sir. But as I say, I'm quite keen for it to be put to a good use, and I think a school would be a good use. But I will get back to the Assembly when we progress this further.
I wonder if I could ask the Chairman of Privileges and Procedures if he's got any plans for increasing the fines for members whose machines ping during the Assembly.
Yes, sir, and I'd like to thank Deputy Wickenden for immediately looking at me when my computer went off, and then looking at you. And, of course, we'll contribute.
The greffier will make a note of that. Thank you. We come to question 13, which Deputy Morrow will ask of the Minister for Treasury and Resources.
Thank you, sir. As the cost of joining Liberation Square with Weybridge Place for the Liberation 75 celebrations is now being borne by the States of Jersey Development Company rather than the Growth, Housing and Environment Department, will the Minister advise the Assembly of any new plans she has for the £2 million that had been allocated in the recent budget to the department for that same work?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. As demonstrated in Table D of the draft budget 2019, the majority of the funding for this project was to be met by unspent capital sums. £580,000 was allocated from 2017 underspends, and the balance was to be funded by underspends identified in 2018. There have been some challenges over the underspends identified as available. Therefore, alternative funding routes have been considered in order to allow the Growth, Housing and Economic Department to get on with the necessary work. One funding solution identified being an element of the return due from SOJDC's College Garden Housing Scheme. This was identified as an appropriate route, with profits made by the state's wholly owned company being used to pay for improvements in public realm. Officers are finalising this proposal. However, no decision has been made as to the best funding method for the Liberation 75 scheme as yet, and therefore no decisions have been made about how best to use the one-off budget this alternative funding route would release. I understand from the Growth, Housing and Environment Department that the scheme is now likely to cost £3 million, not £2 million, and I await an explanation of the variations when I consider the recommendation of officers. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased that the Treasury Minister is aware that the scheme has increased in price by 50% within 3 months of us passing the budget. I would also like to know whether when the Minister became aware of this new funding route and when this new funding route or kind of exploration of this new funding route began.
Thank you, sir. As I said in my opening remarks, the original estimate was made at £2 million based on a high-level concept design, which was produced for the business case in the middle of last year. The scheme has now been developed up to feasibility stage, which has enabled a more detailed estimate to be produced. And this work has highlighted the challenge of the task of rerouting the traffic from the busy road and the need to find a solution for buses which currently access the bus station through this route.
Sorry, sir. That was not, in my view, an answer to my question. The question was, when did the Minister become aware, or when did the Minister start exploring this new funding route? Thank you, sir.
As I said, sir, it's in conjunction with the Growth, Housing and Environment Department as to what their alternatives are for this public realm development. So when we have all the variations, we can work on what the increase or not may be.
I think the question, Minister, was when you started looking at alternative methods of financing.
Gosh, sir, it's very difficult to say. It must have been about 5 or 6 months ago, I would have thought.
On Thompson-Tellier.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister confirm that she recalls promises made to this Assembly and to the people of Jersey that the estimates of between £50 and £75 million of revenue from the development of the waterfront and the Esplanade Quarter would be used for urban regeneration schemes? And that in the absence of a mechanism for prioritising this funding, the Regeneration Steering Group is the appropriate body to take a view on this. And so will she undertake to bring any changes in the funding plans for the joining of these two open spaces to that group so that they can make the decision about it?
Absolutely, sir. It would be very a terrible mishap if we did not bring the Regeneration Steering Group to the table.
One supplementary.
Thank you, sir. If the Minister was aware 5 or 6 months ago that a new funding route was being explored or the need for a new funding route, may I ask why the states were asked to vote on this £2 million allocation in the budget, given that it had already been chosen to go elsewhere for this money? Thank you, sir.
So that was only a sort of alternative in case we couldn't find funding anywhere else. And we knew that that was going to be the initial request, The £1 million more, as I've already said, it depends on what the Environment Department come up with as the variation on the theme.
We come to question 14, which Deputy Ash will ask of the Minister for Health and Social Services.
Thank you, sir. Is the Minister aware of any current problems with parking in close proximity to the hospital? And if so, what plans does he have to ensure that more provision is made?
Minister.
Sir, public parking in close proximity to the hospital is the responsibility of the Minister for Infrastructure or the Constable St Helier, specifically the Minister for Infrastructure for Patriotic Street Car Park and the Constable in respect of on-street parking. But members can rest assured that should this Assembly decide that the hospital will remain on the current site for up to 10 years, then I will have discussions with both of those parties, because clearly we all know there is pressure on parking. It is known that people arrive at the hospital clinics sometimes in quite a harassed state, having been unable to find parking spaces. It may not be about the absolute number of spaces, but we can also give consideration to how they are managed. For example, could all-day parking be replaced perhaps by parking for 2 or 3 hours? And on the part of the Health and Community Services, we could look at how we organise appointments to perhaps reduce or stagger demand for parking. So if we can deliver more care in the community and in GP surgeries, that will alleviate some of the pressure. We can look at times of appointments. We can try and extend the working day and make appointments available in the evenings, and finally make better use of clinical facilities. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister agree with me that with the delay in the hospital, it's absolutely paramount that we make every effort to make the patient experience as comfortable as possible over what will become a very challenging next few years?
That is certainly a very high priority, sir, and I would welcome discussions with the Deputy and any other parties as to how we might do this, but I certainly see the continued use of the hospital and particularly the outpatient facilities there as needing those facilities for parking there needing to be improved.
Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister not accept that the lack of parking, and even with an extra floor on Patriotic Street, is a very good reason why the hospital should not be located where it is? Because in fact, it should be actually at some other location where proper parking facilities can be put in place.
This is not a question about whether a new hospital should go, it's a question about parking.
Still relates to parking, sir, because if we've got problems now, we're going to have even more problems if it stays.
It's just a warning to members that we're not going to go questioning about where the new hospital is going. Carry on then, Minister.
Well, as you rightly say, sir, this is about current difficulties and not hypothetical difficulties that might arise in the future. I mean, the current scheme that this Assembly approved was subjected to all sorts of testing and traffic studies, and it was considered sufficient that the extra floor on Patriotic Street would meet need. And we don't know how we will be accessing facilities in the years to come when a hospital might be delivered on the Gloucester Street site. As I've mentioned, it's imperative we give more care in the community and in GP surgeries. I do believe we are bringing people into clinics where we don't really need them to come in from rural parishes or wherever they live to a clinic. We can deliver the care they need in their homes or perhaps in community hubs. So there are various ways of mitigating the pressures on a hospital.
Constable St Helier.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to start by correcting the Minister when he said that the Constable of St Helier is responsible for the on-street parking. Obviously, that only applies if there are parish roads rather than main roads, and there's clearly not much provision of that around the hospital. Could the Minister confirm that the 40% of users of the hospital who currently do so without needing to park takes a great deal of pressure of the demand that we already have? And would he further agree to look at, with the Minister for GHE, prioritising parking in Patriotic Street for users of the hospital? Because there are a lot of very able-bodied people who currently park in there who are perfectly able to park in Pier Road if they're, for example, commuting. And that would free up space for the people who really need the space in Patriotic Street. So.
A number of questions there. I think I should have jotted down some notes. But, so, yes, I will discuss with the Minister for Infrastructure and DFI on the use of Patriotic Street car park. I mean, some parts of that car park are presently used exclusively for hospital users. As to the first comment made by the Connotab, yes, they are, of course, state's main roads around two sides of the hospital site. I was thinking more so of the Newgate Street and Patriotic Place parking, where I think people tend to try and park if they're visiting clinics. I hope that answers the question, sir.
Final supplementary. Thank you very well. We now come to questions to ministers without notice. The first question period is in relation to the Minister for Treasury and Resources, and I invite questions. Deputy Trustee.
Thank you, sir. The Minister is, I'm sure, fully briefed on how our investments are going generally. Certainly we sat at Social Security on the Treasury Advisory Board for a number of years, and our investments did particularly well. The market has dropped significantly. Can you just give us an idea of how our investments are faring? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank the Deputy for his question, and the answer is not as well as they were doing 6 months ago. However, we had a hedging situation against the level of the US dollar, which came down to nil and has now been reinstated as of, when was that? May, I think, in which £352 million has been triggered to be 50% hedged against the US dollar. And the investments have on the Social Security Reserve Fund, i.e. known as the Pension Fund, are now at about 1.4 billion, where they were 1.2. So although they might be not doing as well as they were, they certainly are in a very good place. But the others have bottomed out, I think might be the phrase, in as much as they're not doing badly, but they're not doing as well as they were, but they were doing exceptionally well.
Thank you, sir. I don't know if I'm the only member who is alarmed by the Minister's admission in her last question, question 13 to Deputy Morell, that when we debated the budget, she knew that the funding for the Weybridge and Liberation Square might not have to come from the states at all, but from another source. How is it possible that the Minister can be comfortable that work is underway on a project costing 3 million instead of 2 million without a funding solution being agreed? What happens if the RSG states that this is not a sufficient priority to be having any call on the money from the waterfront?
So I'm not in the slightest bit alarmed, as I said in my opening remarks, Deputy Morell's question, that money has been put aside and the design concept has been gone into, but no work has started. And I've already agreed with him that we would be talking with the St Helier Regeneration Steering Group. We're also obviously waiting for the Environment Department to come back with what their wishes are. There's various requests going on here. Some people say that if you close the road and put new paving over the whole area of Liberation Square and Weybridge Square, then the Liberation Square side of it, which was completed quite a long time ago, will look incredibly forlorn in comparison with what we're doing. So that may be another use for the extra £1 million, but that's not been decided.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask the Minister whether she expects to have to put aside funds to fund a fully funded legal aid model. If so, how much is she expecting to have to put aside, and when is she expecting to have to put that aside?
Thank you, Deputy, for his question. Of course, this is quite a fiery problem at the moment with legal aid, and the debate has not, as he will know, not yet been had, so we don't know what any allocation of spending would be. It's also very difficult to allocate spending when we're in the middle of producing the annual accounts for 2018 to know what underspends would be to allocate in 2019.
Deputy Aye.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise the Assembly when she intends to implement independent taxation, which is long overdue, and would she further advise what the overall response to her personal tax review survey has been? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The first part of the question was independent taxation, and it may not come to that. We're waiting for the results of the survey as to whether it is independent taxation, as in the UK, or whether we follow a process of household taxation, which is what is executed with Social Security. So it's not a decision that's been made yet until we have all the results of the survey. And I think the Deputy will be very well aware that I was very supportive of Deputies Pershard and Doublé in their married ladies, women's taxation, and to be able to find a way around that.
Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir. When we debated P1 2018 and passed it under Article 8, we introduced a new provision to require the Treasury and Resources Minister, after consulting the Chief Minister and Accounting Officer, to give the State Assembly at least 2 weeks' notice of transfer of one head of expenditure to another. Could the Minister please point out where the 2 weeks' notice was given and where I can find it for the recent transfers of heads of expenditure under the R155 report, transition report, please?
Thank you, sir. As the Deputy will obviously be aware, we've had various emails about this and they have been answered.
Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. Rather than commenting on any individual bid, could the Minister provide an update on the current investment appraisal bid process and when further monies may be released to support various areas of government, including culture, arts and sport?
Yes, sir. This is the Investment Appraisal Board that the Senator is referring to, which is relatively newly established. And it was established because the regulatory system around the previous way of Council of Ministers dealing with bids for grants to function in various different reasons has become more regulated. There's now a board of officers which see the bids, and the reason it seems to be more regulated is that they see all bids in the round. So priorities can be given as to essential needs and those that can possibly wait for a year. This appraisal board then sends its recommendations to the Chief Executive Officer and the Treasurer, and then they recommend to the Minister for Treasury and Resources as to what is signed off or not. Second part of your question, in a previous life, I was very, very involved with the arts and continue to be so, and will pursue arts-related grants, but obviously the appraisals come before I get to see any of them.
I just wondered if the Minister could give us any idea, because it's the way in which these bids are being released seems to have slowed up in over recent weeks. Could you give us any idea when, you know, has it stalled, or are these bids currently being assessed?
Yes, sir, the bids are currently being assessed, but there's £100 million worth of bids and about 100 bids. And I said before, they have to be put in a priority order, and it is a new board, and I agree with the Senator that is operating a little slowly, but with that amount of bids to put in order of priority, it's quite difficult.
Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. The recent housing report identified the reluctance of residents to downsize as being one of the contributory problems to the housing shortage. Would the Minister agree to consider with the Housing Minister possible ways of incentivising downsizing, including the reduction or exemption of stamp duty on those who do downsize when buying their next house?
Yes, sir. Andium Homes are already investigating this with a way to persuade people to release family houses in order to downsize to more appropriate, possibly, apartments. So it's already being looked at.
Can I clarify, sir, that I appreciate the Andium situation, but my question is a more general one, and not just relating to those within the ambit of Andium.
Yes, I think it's something I'll have to discuss more with the Housing Minister as to where the incentive is to downsize outside of the Andium project.
Deputy Wickenden.
So I just would like to challenge the answer the Minister gave us. I do not feel that the question was answered, and even if it had been done in a private email, it's the right of anyone in this Assembly to ask a question in a public forum and have it answered, and not just be told it's been emailed to the member. Could the Minister please confirm where the 2 weeks' notice was published under the law?
Thank you, sir. I admire the Deputy's persistence. I can't answer the question as to when and where it was published, but I will find out and get back to him.
Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. I was going to ask for an answer to Deputy Wickenden's question as well, sir.
Deputy Truscott.
Thank you, sir. The Minister and I were both made aware while we were at Social Security of a number of companies and individuals that were in arrears with their Social Security contributions. The department became very proactive in actually collecting those arrears. I am also aware, and I'm sure as the Minister, that there's a number of companies and individuals hold back on their ITIS payments. Is the Minister's department proactive in pursuing these arrears? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Very good question, because yes, we have been, but only as of last year, in pursuing people who have not hit the deadline for their tax receipts, and by giving them a sort of a gap, if you like, a sort of holiday of when they have to repay this. It's raised a £1.5 million for the tax revenue department, so it did work by doing that. But I think the whole tax system is now changing. It's completely outdated. I mean, the last tax law as such was 1965. So the system is changing to a much updated computer system, and there will be online filing. There'll also be, just to add, paper filing if people still want to pursue that, which will hopefully negate these back payments and people not coming forward with their ITIS in time.
If there are no more questions for the Treasury Minister, then we will come to the second question period for the Minister for Children and Housing. Deputy Truscott.
Thank you, sir. The My Deposit scheme started some 3 years ago, Minister. There were a few, originally, some teething problems. I'd just like an update on the My Deposit scheme. Do you think it's working? Are there any problems? That will do for now. Thank you, sir.
Minister.
So I thank the Deputy for the question. I am thoroughly pleased with the tenancy deposit protection scheme. I think it was the right thing to introduce it in the island, and I had personally had experience of the UK scheme before Jersey introduced its scheme, and I'd spotted problems with the UK scheme that we didn't replicate when we introduced it here. I think it is the case that certain elements of it didn't necessarily go as expected. There were we didn't receive as large an amount of money into the scheme as we thought would be the case. I have been satisfied enough with the scheme, however, to authorise a 2-year extension to it, and in the process of that extension, we will, of course, revert to the usual process of looking for alternative options or a renewal at the next stage. I have met those who lead the My Deposit scheme. I believe they're coming back to the island again next month, and if there are any particular issues that we think there may be with the scheme or ways that we could improve it, we'd be grateful to hear that, pass it on to them and do what we can to improve it for both landlords and tenants.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I'm pleased that you have extended it for 2 years. It gives continuity. But whilst it's Social Security, we were discussing that we could bring it in-house, and I'm just wondering if the Minister might want to consider talking to Social Security with that view in hand. Obviously, getting the money locally and administrating it locally would be a good thing. Thank you, sir.
So when the scheme was first mooted, there were several ideas about how it could be facilitated, not just doing it in-house, but doing it with a third sector local provider was also considered as well. And the reason I understand that those options weren't pursued at the time was simply because the expertise and the experience with doing that sort of work didn't exist. I said in the answer to the first question that when it comes up for the end of its 5 years, there obviously does have to be a full and transparent process for looking at how we move forward. I'm sure that that option will be one that would be considered, but we have to accept that there are downsides associated with that. And it is a fact, I think, that the My Deposits people do a very good job, are very experienced, and are doing an excellent job.
Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. If housing benefit is taken as indicative of the number of people in social rented properties, as shown in question WQ 79-2019 today, or the answer to a written question, and this supports the contention that the state makes the market, when will the Minister remove the concept of 90% of market rent, as it just inflates the cost of housing within the island?
So I thank the Senator for her question, and she raises issues that I myself have expressed my deep concerns about, not just as Housing Minister, but as a backbencher beforehand, and I reiterate that I voted against the introduction of the 90% rule in the first place. I have said that I want the first piece of work that the new Housing Policy Development Board undertakes to be looking at the rental calculation system and looking towards moving to a system which is sustainable and fair, not just for tenants, but also to the taxpayer as well, of course. That is not a piece of work that could be done overnight, but I remain 100% committed to it because I think it's the right thing to do.
Supplementary, sir. The Minister has now been in post for 6 or 7 months. When can we expect to see this?
Absolutely fair question, and I find the constraints of power as frustrating as anybody else does. It had always been our ambition, and I would ask her to read the Reform Jersey Manifesto, obviously an excellent read. I recommend everybody reads it. But that very clearly said that we would undertake a larger piece of work to do this and to find that new system. The format that was agreed to be taken with the Chief Minister was that it would go through a Housing Policy Development Board. I will say that I found it frustrating that it has taken as long as it has to be in a position where we're almost ready to launch that, and I think that experience has probably been felt with some of the other policy development boards as well, but you live and learn.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Further to my question on 9th of October regarding the installation of fire extinguishers in all Andium low-rise flats, the Minister promised to raise the issue at the next meeting with Andium. Would the Minister inform the Assembly what progress, if any, has been made?
Thank you, sir. I'm actually due to have a meeting with Andium very shortly. It's been a while since my last one. I suspect it may have been before that question was raised. I have a long list of items I need to be raised with them. I will say, I know his question was about low-rise flats, but I have seen firsthand the work that's been done on some of the high-rise flats, and I'm confident that Andium will be meeting its obligations there.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. May I ask the Minister, as Minister for Children, pleased as I am that the settlement scheme for EU nationals will no longer incur a charge, does he have any concerns over children being registered throughout the island, in particular those in perhaps families with difficult relationships or coercive relationships where they may become a tool in that game?
So I think the Deputy shines a light on what is an important issue, and I will confess that I've not had a discussion along those lines with the External Relations Minister who's taking a lead or the Home Affairs Minister for that matter as well, who are taking the lead on this scheme. I thank him for raising that, and I will ask to have that discussion with both ministers so I can seek assurances that something will be in place to make sure that children's rights are protected and defended throughout that scheme.
Deputy Peter.
Yes, thank you, sir. The Minister has shared his thoughts with us on 90% of Andium rents being a fair social rent, and I accept that as a calculation that isn't necessarily fair. And I listened before when you were saying you were going to have a review with Andium to set this, but surely you must have some ideas in your mind about how you're going to calculate these fair rents and what you perceive as being an acceptable outcome. Can you please share those thoughts with us?
Through the chair, please. The Minister.
Sir, in beginning this process where we will start to do the work, and bear in mind that I will not be the only person involved in this work. This is work that will involve other ministers. We will invite expressions of interest from non-ministerial states members, and also people who are in the sector as well will be involved in putting this together. So it's not a case of my dream of the perfect system will necessarily prevail. It may well be the case that it's not done on a percentage of market rate at all. There may be another form of calculation based on people's earnings instead. But I say that at this point, I remain open-minded on that because there will be a process that will go through to find a better system at the end.
Deputy Teddy.
Thank you. With regard to the issue of discrimination against families with children in housing, does the Minister believe that his answer given to written question 21, saying that work is anticipated to commence in 2020, subject to public consultation, and will be done by Social Security, is soon enough? And could it not be an alternative way forward that this matter be dealt with by order, by amending the residential tenancy law, for example, and so that it becomes a matter directly under his remit?
Sir, I would have to double-check the wording of the original proposition. If I recall correctly, I think the wording of the proposition that made this decision was that it would be an issue to do with the discrimination law rather than the residential tenancy law. So if there's an alternative that can be dealt with there, then we'd have to look into that and give that more consideration. But more broad on the point of his question, let me be open and frank about this. I am incredibly frustrated that I am consistently still seeing advertisements for properties on the market being put out by letting agents that are still saying no children, and when you look at the properties, I simply can't fathom why those properties would possibly be unsuitable for children. I reiterate my view to those letting agents that they should stop doing that now. Don't wait for it to become enshrined in our discrimination law. Adopt that practice now, because there is not a good excuse in the vast majority of cases that I've seen, and I'll be writing to letting agents shortly to make my view on that perfectly clear to them, and I will be pressuring the Social Security Minister to help deliver this through the discrimination law, but I'm happy to have a discussion with him if he thinks there's alternatives as well.
So the supplementary, would the Minister undertake to come back to the Assembly, not just me, looking at whether the residential tenancy law or any other law that is within his purview can be amended easily, either by coming back to the Assembly or by order, in order to get an amendment that states clearly that it is discriminatory and that practice will be outlawed officially?
So I'm happy to look at the residential tenancy law and take advice on that and get back to members.
Other questions for the Minister of Children? Yes, Sir Constance Saviour.
Sir, I'd like to ask the Minister, I have a lot of housing estates in my parish, and I have a lot of them that are under-occupied. A lot of the people who are in them, although they've had them for the best part of their life, now find them very difficult to maintain and keep going in, and they would be quite happy to downsize. But if they are to downsize, it's going to cost them. Can you not sort of waiver that? Would that not sort of please everybody? You would then have a family home, and you would have a couple or a lady or a gentleman on their own who could then move into an apartment instead of having to have more rent So they might as well stay where they are, and everybody loses out. So could you not look into that, please, Minister, for me?
Could the Minister not look into it? Yes.
So could I just ask clarification from the questioner? Was she referring to the social sector or private sector?
No, I'm referring to the housing estates, the social sector that I have. Yes, sir.
It is the case, and it is in some respects a bizarre consequence of the rental arrangements that were put forward in 2014, that people can be worse off when they downsize, when actually in many instances we want to help people downsize so that we can free up their properties for families. She is right that is a problem, and it is something that the Housing Policy Development Board will be looking at, because I think it is right that we help people to end up in the properties that are most suited for them. But I just reiterate a point that I've made previously, that I don't think that it's right for us to be coercive when trying to force people out of their homes. I do think that we should have a compassionate approach to people's family circumstances there.
Deputy St Peter.
Thank you, sir. The Minister has indicated that he's looking to try and implement some rent controls in the private landlord sector. I'm sure it's very well documented in his manifesto, which I'm afraid I haven't read. However, can you please share with us how this can practically be implemented and delivered upon?
Sir, he says he hasn't read the manifesto. I urge him to read it, because I do think that it makes it clear. The manifesto itself made no pledge to introduce rent caps or anything like that. What it did say is that we would undertake a piece of work that would look at the rental market and work out what regulation is appropriate for ensuring that there are fair and affordable rents. And I think it is the case that there are lots of properties out there on the rental market that are being put out for extortionate and unjustifiable prices. One pledge that we did make in that manifesto was the reintroduction of the Rent Tribunal. I've instructed my officers to do the beginnings of work on that, and I will have them report back to me in March to have a look at a bit more detail from that. But of course, none of that would be put forward to this Assembly without the full views of Assembly members being put to me and having a vote on the final proposition.
Thanks, sir. I know it's an issue which may theoretically fall under environmental health, but insofar as it touches housing, is it still the long-term plan that all properties that are rented out as homes should be subject to an inspection in the future before the landlord is given a licence to be able to rent out that property? If not, why not?
So, I mean, that question would be better put to the Environment Minister, who is more up to date on the very specifics of how that is being implemented. I understand that there are certain tests that would need to be met before we get to a point of looking at those next stages, but the Environment Minister would provide a more in-depth answer than me.
Come to St Lawrence. St Lawrence.
Oh, sorry, sir. Thank you, sir. How does the Minister ensure that children are not excluded from mainstream schooling unnecessarily?
So again, this question would be better placed at the education. Would be better placed to the Education Minister, who has more active involvement in what is happening at schools and whether people are taking out from that. I certainly reiterate that we have made pledges to put the interests of children first, and exclusion should always be a very, very last resort, and we should be doing whatever we possibly can to make sure that children who have complex needs for whatever reason have those needs met and receive the support they can to make sure that they are able to have as fulfilling experience at school as possible.
May I have a supplementary, please, sir?
Indeed.
Yes, thank you. How does I acknowledge the Minister's response, but as Minister for Children, how involved does he think he should be in making decisions on the exclusion of children from school unnecessarily?
Well, so I wouldn't want to be involved in any decision that was unnecessary. I think decisions, of course, should only be made when they are necessary and when there's no alternative options. I do think it's right that in the first instance that should be the duty of the Education Minister, but of course I do work very closely with her, and if I had any concerns over policies or particular examples, I would have no trouble in having an audience with her to express those concerns. And of course, I'm also Assistant Education Minister, but that is mostly for the purposes of the children's portfolio.
Deputy Alves.
Given the projections for 7,000 extra homes if population trends continue, what will the Minister do to get empty properties back on the market?
So I thank the Deputy for that question. The projections for 7,000 extra homes comes from the Objective Assessment of Housing Needs report, which was not necessarily a prediction of where we certainly will be at the end of that time frame, but it would be where we would be if we did nothing, and has been quite helpful in providing us with a breakdown of what sorts of accommodation we would need in that circumstance. So I guess the two answers to that is, firstly, we won't need to do that much because there will be a population policy that comes forward that will help to deal with some of that. But on the issue of empty properties, I've spoken to the Chief Minister, and this is something that we are both interested in having the Housing Policy Development Board look at. That is, in terms of the other work we're doing, is probably not quite as onerous a piece of work as some of the others, and we would look to see what we can do to incentivise those properties that are empty for no good reason to be put back on the market. And I can't give her a timeline for when those proposals will come forward, but it is on our radar and we will be looking at it.
Constance Brillard.
Thank you. So going back to social rental controls, capping or what have you, would the Minister give members some thought as to how his mind is working? He alluded to the need to do a piece of work, but maybe he has some thoughts of his own which he might like to communicate with us. Thank you.
So I did say in answer to an earlier question that I remain open-minded on what the final solution to this should look like. I think there are things that can be looked at that will help us in terms of the understanding there is between Andium Homes and the Treasury. Of course, they provide the Treasury a very, very significant return every year, but likewise the Treasury also supplements Social Security by sending money that way, much of which will then get paid in rent to Andium. So there's money that's going around there, and I think that there could be some help we could provide the system by looking at that arrangement. But as I said, I will not be the only person involved in this work, and I do genuinely want to be open-minded about what alternative solutions could look like.
Thank you. That brings questions to ministers without notice to an end. There's nothing under J or under K. We now come to public business. The first item of public business is Gerrier, promotion by the public sector, P143, lodged by Deputy Masson. Deputy, do you wish to make your proposal with incorporating the Second Amendment?
If possible, yes, please, sir.
Members don't oppose that? Very well, then I will ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended by the Second Amendment.
The States has to decide whether they have opinion to request the Council of Ministers to agree A, that all official and departmental letterheadings produced and used by the public sector in Jersey should include Gerrier as well as English, subject to paragraph B. B, that within 4 months it will produce guidelines for how Gerrier will be incorporated into all official signage and letterheadings produced and used by the public sector in Jersey. C, that the aforementioned guidelines should have the default position that Gerrier is used and will seek to incorporate Gerrier as much as is reasonably possible. D, that insofar as is reasonably practicable, this policy should also extend to the courts and those bodies wholly or partly owned by the states or in receipt of states funding, with implementation plans to be included in their next annual reports. E, that the implementation of the aforementioned should be as and when materials are renewed, replaced or rebranded. F, that l'Office de Gerrier should be consulted for any translation service as an official authoritative body. And G, that the practicalities of implementing the above policy for publications, websites and social media should be explored and a report presented by the Council of Ministers to the Assembly within 12 months of this proposition being approved.
Deputy, you wish to propose the amendment, the proposition.
Thank you, sir. I think, as many members will know, we are in the UNESCO Year of Indigenous Languages, so perhaps this is an opportune time for us to look at our own Indigenous language, Gerrier, and how we can look to support it. I'd just like to begin by thanking the l'Office de Gerrier, the teachers, Professor Mari Jones of the University of Cambridge, who have all helped me with my proposition and keep providing me with sources and evidence for my speech today. I would also like to thank the Council of Ministers and how they received me at their meeting in order to explain my proposition. In particular, I'd like to thank the Chief Minister in dealing with this particular matter. As members would have read from my second amendment, there was an issue waiting for civil servants to deliver an amendment that never progressed. In the meantime, of course, I went and got on with it. And with some proactive work from the Chief Minister, we managed to get to an agreed position. So I'd just like to thank the Chief Minister for taking that time. He's a very busy man with very many other important matters to consider, but I would like just to thank him for the proactive way he has engaged in what is effectively a backbencher's proposition. When presenting my proposition, I did email members round a copy of the Gerrier Plan, 2017 to 2019, R72, to which I'm sure many members in preparation for this debate have read extensively. But just to talk to my particular proposition, I'd like to quote from page 14 of that document, where it says that a successful campaign to give prominence to Gerrier requires that the state itself sets an example. Departments will be encouraged to adopt their own plan and will be given assistance by the language officer in preparing translations for signage and other materials. Similar support will be offered to the private sector. There have already been excellent examples of public and private bodies using Gerrier in this way. For example, Jersey Post employing the language on the stamp and the Treasury giving prominence to on-island banknotes. Text on the parish of St Helier vehicles, recent bilingual signage in English and Gerrier by trading standards in the central market. So I come to this debate really not asking the states to necessarily do anything new, but simply to take this opportunity and when the rebranding of departments, etc., are going on, to kind of reinforce perhaps that commitment and perhaps give us a little bit more strength in going forward as some of the language within this particular plan is a little bit woolly. I'm trying just to reinforce that particular position, but I would like to state that the government's position already is that we do support and want to use Gerrier within the public sector. Now, members were contacted by a member of the public who expressed an interest in this particular debate, and first of all, I'd like to thank them for showing some interest, even though we might sit on opposite sides of this particular debate. It's good when members of the public get interested in a matter. Now, they were of the opinion that, as for Gerrier, it was never used by locals as a form of communication in the written sense. Now, from these sources that I have distributed to members by email, they will see that actually Gerrier was used in the written form, even going back as far as 1786. We have examples of source material which demonstrates the use of Gerrier in the written form. So I don't want to dwell on the point, but I think I provided some evidence to show that this is part of our culture, it is part of our heritage. Of course, if you do want to go back further, you do have to remember the context of the time. Gerrier being more of a language of the farming community, perhaps we would call them peasants nowadays. Well, Quelle surprise in times when literacy rates weren't quite as what they are today. It was mainly only an oral language and perhaps not much was written down. Not necessarily a great shock to me, but I just want to point out that actually it has been used for in the written sense for quite some time. I would say historians might look back and look at what was. I'd like to think that politicians look forward as to what could be. An example for this might be around the Manx language when looking in comparison now. Of course, the Manx language, as some members will know, was officially declared dead and extinguished up until the point where members of the Manx community started writing to the UN to say, in their own native language, to which to say, if Manx is dead, what exactly is this language I'm writing to you in? To which they then had to reverse the position and say, oh, actually, it's still there. So the point is, revivals of languages can happen. It does come to the commitment of the communities that they want to, that the communities want to put in there. So Gerrier is an important part of our heritage, our local identity. It does help when we go and talk to, in particular, our Norman neighbours, the soft diplomacy side where we can reference it. It does help with those conversations. It's something we're proud to do. So we should look to see how we can support it going forward. Turning to the particulars of my proposition, as amended, what I'm hoping to do is, yes, promote the use of Gérié within letterheads and signages within the island. Now, Part B, which I brought in, is basically let's apply some common sense. I think there were a few civil servants that balked as soon as they saw the word all. But the idea is, speaking with the council ministers, let's apply some common sense around here. So, I think some were perhaps getting concerned that big tomes were needed to be produced in Gérié. That's not exactly where I'm looking to go. But to begin with, can we start looking at things like the titles of documents, perhaps the indexes, perhaps the headings? Let's look at that, how we can incorporate it in a way which might help promote the language in documentations. And again, the matter on signage, we had this conversation around the council minister's table. Am I looking for the fishing regulations on St Catherine's Pier to be done in Gérié? No, but again, let's look at the title of that particular sign. Could that be in Gérié? So it's again, how can we incorporate it that just applies some common sense? Which is why I'm asked the council ministers to come back with some guidelines, because they've come back with some technical matters where it might be difficult. And today, I'm happy to look at that in a reasonable fashion. And again, that's also then asking outside bodies, outside the states, to look at it, which, as I said, are whether that's the courts or bodies wholly or partly owned by the state or in states funding, and some already do. And in the pack that I already issued to members, of course, if you remember Chequers, the Chequers signs, when they had their welcomes did include Gérié in them as well. So again, it's not like I'm really asking anything particularly new, but again, it's just, again, providing that support to the language and how we kind of want to see it going forward. But it does provide flexibility for those organisations to decide how they're going to take it forward. It's not saying thou shalt have to do this, but it is saying, well, what can you do? Which is what I'm asking members to agree today. All of this to be done when signage and letterheads, etc. Materials are renewed, replaced or rebranded. So I'm not expecting it to be done tomorrow, but of course, when materials are renewed, which is normal within the corporate sphere or in the state sphere, we know we're going through vast amounts of rebranding in the states at the moment. Therefore, you're going to have new signage, new letterheads having to be reformatted, relooked at anyway. So why don't we take this opportunity to see how we can encourage Gérié within those spheres to be used, which is what I'm asking there, but only when, as I say, it's kind of down to normal maintenance procedures anyway. Part F asks to recognise L'Office de Gérié as the main port of call when it comes to translation services. I would hope that wouldn't be a controversial matter. And again, the last part G, is then looking, as I said, a bit more broadly about perhaps publications, tweets, things like that. And just to say, I'm not expecting tomes to be produced in Gérié. I don't think that would be practical. But again, how can we incorporate Gérié into those publications? Is that the title page alongside English? Is that the index? Things like that. If you could get someone really creative behind there, we could do something very exciting. So I hope members will be able to support this proposition today. I haven't asked anyone to second it. I hope it will find favour, and I make the proposition, sir.
Seconder. Yes, sir. We come to the amendment lodged by Deputy Tadje, and ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, before the words "to request the Council of Ministers to agree," insert the following new paragraph. 1. The Gérié should be recognised as one of the official languages of the Assembly. And redesignate the opening words "to request the Council of Ministers to agree" as paragraph 2 of the proposition.
Deputy
Thank you, sir. So in starting, may I ask the question, comment vous êtes? Mais je suis de chambre, merci bien de fait. I wouldn't necessarily have been able to say that quite so well a few years ago, and I'd like to pay tribute to the great Gérié teachers that have been recently employed. I think we've got 4 who work officially for the Education Department, but who work closely with my department and go into schools and also come into the Assembly. And many members will know who have availed themselves of the opportunity to learn our native tongue that those classes take place every week, and I think that for those of us who have attended, I think they've been very useful. I also hope that during the course of this speech I won't have to nip out because it's considered impolite. I've drunk a lot of water today and I may need to visit La Petite Maison during the course of this debate, but I hope not. I think I can just hold on till lunchtime. Now, there are certain words which you'd recognise. La Petite Maison is clearly, literally means the little house, but it's well known to mean the lavatory. And there are lots of similarities for anyone who may be a French speaker to picking up Gérier. But as I've been told, you're supposed to leave your French at the door when you learn Gérier, but don't shut the door, because you might need it. There are other words which are not immediately obvious. So we've got lots of seagulls in Jersey. They like to congregate in different places around town, and at Snow Hill they like to go and eat the leftover food from the bins. And I think it's great that the constable leaves so many of those black bags out for them to feed them. And in French, they'll be called, because we've got to look after our wildlife. And in French, they call them les mouettes, but that wouldn't be much use to you if you were wanting to find the Gérier word, which is mauve, of course. And when you start to look at the etymology of that word, you find that actually that's an old English word. It comes from, I think it's merve, or mo, it would be pronounced, which is related to mew. I think Germans used merve. And that's because Gérier didn't evolve from French, which is often a misconception. It's sometimes called Jersey French. It's a form of Norman French. And those of us who had our memories refreshed about the evolution of the language will know that, of course, Jersey was part of the Norman invasions. When the Battle of Hastings occurred, there would have been Jersey and Guernsey men who would have taken part in that, who would have gone over to the Battle of Hastings. And with the success of William the Conqueror, that there was a change that took place to the Saxon language, to the English language over there, and so that many of the root words that we have go back to Old English and Norman French, which are the roots of our modern Gérier, if you like. So it's amazing how much controversy something like language can create. And even a simple amendment like this, and I need to congratulate Deputy Masson as well, because I think this is going in the right direction, can cause. But it's perhaps not surprising, because language is intrinsically linked to our concept of identity and self-identity, both in a personal sense and in a collective sense. And if you've seen some of the threads that have taken place on social media, you'd think that this is perhaps the most controversial issue. As some people saying quite agree with it, I absolutely understand where the two deputies are coming from, and the preservation and promotion of Gérier is really important. And other people simply taking a utilitarian argument, which goes thus, essentially, what's the point in preserving a language or using a language or allowing a language to be used in your assembly which isn't spoken widely and which isn't understood widely? And I could understand that argument. I can understand it from a utilitarian point of view, but I'd suggest that doesn't take into account the value of any language, but especially our own Gérier language. Now, if anyone is willing to stand up and saying that we should just willingly nail the lid on the coffin of Gérier and not bother investing in it, I think they should stand up during this debate and say that, and that's a valid political point to have, a point of view, but it's not one that I share, and I hope it's not one that most of us share. I think we recognise the intrinsic value of Gérier, and I think we also recognise the fact that if we don't promote it and we don't preserve it as an island and as an assembly and also as a government, then we can't expect anybody else to do it for us. Gérier is not going to be starting to be spoken in the Welsh Assembly or in the Scottish Assembly or in Westminster. They're not going to make provisions under their standing orders or under their customs to be able to do that. It's something that we have to do as an assembly. There are some Gérier speakers in this assembly, and I hope that there will also be some fluent Gérier speakers in the future, although not necessarily in the immediate future, but we may have some. And so I think what this does, it's permissive. I don't think we need to get into the arguments about, well, what happens if somebody stands up and makes an entire speech in Gérier. I hope that's a problem we one day have to contend with, but it's certainly not something that I anticipate anytime soon. And if people are saying that actually English is the only language that we should be using, then I would challenge those members to turn their attention to French, which was the pre-existing language of this Assembly for centuries, and which up until 1900, we learned from the comments submitted by PPC, it took an actual decision of the States Assembly to allow its members to converse and debate in English. So the primary language of this Assembly was, and presumably theoretically remains, French. English then came along. But all during that time, there were many Gerrier speakers in the islands who would have been speaking on a daily basis, and no doubt the States members themselves. So I'm not trying to turn back the clock in this with some kind of rose-tinted spectacles, but I'm saying that it's an important part of our strategy, and that a simple amendment to allow for it to be spoken occasionally when appropriate in the Assembly should not be too much to ask. And so I make the proposition.
The amendment seconded. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Commodore St John.
Thank you, sir. I would like to congratulate Deputy Masson on bringing this proposition, and I shall be supporting the main proposition. But as for the amendment, I have significant difficulties. Firstly, Gerrier is not an official language, and it does vary depending on whether you're in St Wan's or Grouville. The second reason, sir, is I sometimes have difficulty understanding what members are saying, and that's when they're speaking English. I'd have no chance at all if they spoke Gerrier. But my third reason, sir, is a very interesting one. Before I started farming, I worked as a relief milker, giving farmers a break, and I'd milk their cows to enable them to have a week or two's holiday. And I was on a farm when, having milked in the morning and left, returned in the afternoon to find that the French couple hadn't done any of the work they were supposed to have, cleaning down the stable, mucking it out, and getting it ready for me with fresh bedding to milk the cows in the evening. I managed to find this French couple, and I swore with the most unparliamentary of language at this couple, telling them to jolly well clean the stable and get it clean. When I'd finished speaking and finished this unparliamentary language, I got a poke in the back from a walking stick, which was the father-in-law of the farmer. And he said, "I didn't know you spoke the Jersey French." On that basis, if unparliamentary language that I was using can be classified as Jersey French, then it cannot possibly be used in this Assembly anyway. Thank you, sir.
Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir. As Deputy Taddier said, in 1900 English was made optional in debates in this Assembly, although laws continued to be drafted in French. In 1946 there was another debate as to whether English or French should remain as the official language of the states. In 1966 Lord Coutange summed up the traditional attachment of members of this Assembly for the French language when he said this: 40 years ago, French was the language largely used in debate and almost exclusively for legislation. When, some years later, the income tax law was being drafted, by this time it was 1928, it had to be in English because no one could draft it in French, whereupon one distinguished but very conservative jurat asked the bailiff to rule whether it was constitutional for a law to be passed in Jersey in a foreign language. Sir, in those days, maybe some people thought English was a foreign language, but I have a question for you, sir, if I may. I know you're a follower of Gerrier and taking lessons yourself, but is it or would it be constitutional for a language to be used in this Assembly that is not spoken or understood completely by the Speaker?
I would clearly have to learn very fast, Deputy.
I'm pleased to follow the Constable of St John's because I would struggle to support Gerrier being used in this Assembly purely because I don't think enough of the population would understand it, and certainly to my embarrassment I wouldn't be able to understand it either.
Any other member wish to speak?
Thank you, sir. And I suppose, responding to the Constable, Deputy of St Martin's, I suppose the issue is we have many members in this assembly who wouldn't understand French, but of course, because it's been allowed in the standing orders, one member could quite easily deliver a speech in French, and whether necessarily all members of the assembly understood that and the public is, of course, another matter. I think practically, if members want to get their point across in the assembly and influence members, they'll use the parlance which is most practicable. But what I would want to say, sir, is when we think about things such as the Liberation Day speeches, and I do recall that, during World War II, Jérier was, of course, a very good language because the locals could speak it and the Germans didn't necessarily understand what they were saying. So during that particular ceremonial state sitting, why shouldn't Jérier be used during that? Why shouldn't it have that recognition? Because actually, it was an important part of our culture. So I think members, I understand exactly where members are coming from. If we had large speeches in Jérier, of course, many of us wouldn't necessarily understand it. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think practically that's going to happen. I think it might be the odd phrase. I think it might be used for ceremonial occasions when actually, why shouldn't we be celebrating our local language on those ceremonial days? But technically under the standing orders, that wouldn't be allowed. So I think perhaps some members are making more of a heavy weather of this than necessarily it needs to be. But I also think, again, this is a UNESCO year of the indigenous languages, and I think it wouldn't look good to say that it's something we would reject from our assembly in that vein if we're trying to promote it. So those are my thoughts on the matter. I think we should deal with it practically. Thank you, sir.
Deputy St Peter.
Sir, please bear with me. Si j'allons parler jersey, j'allons ti chanter ma Normandie, et ben intrus normand. And I was wondering if the Deputy Tadyer would respond, preferably in English.
So if it's a point of clarification, I'm happy to come back now. But I can...
You have a chance to respond at the end, but I didn't make the point earlier, but until this proposition is adopted, actually it's not possible to use Jersey French in this assembly. Thank you. Deputy Martin.
Well, sir, you've just ruined my speech because I am trying English. It's a Cockney version, Deputy. Sorry. And I'll probably be the one that the Constable of St John's can very rarely understand. But until you just made that ruling, sir, and I remember a fantastic speech by the Constable of St Saviour on Liberation Day, and there was lots of little bits in it with Jérier, which she speaks brilliantly. I don't know, obviously she would speak it well. My problem being official, and I can understand where, I don't know, I have no idea, sir, what the Deputy of St Peter said, but I'm going to be told. My problem is we have, Deputy Tadyer has quoted Jérier many, many times. And helpfully, after he's done it, he's translated it into English for me. I have to trust, sir, that that's right. Is there something lost in translation, as they say? I don't know. But this is where, I listened to his speech, and it was a bit, well, we don't want the Assembly to never be able to allow to speak Jérier. As long as I've been here, people have gone off and spoken in Jérier in the middle of a speech, explained something, and then they've always explained it to the Assembly what they mean. So now, sir, with that ruling, I don't know, because I'm sort of of the sentiment, it won't ruin my life, so I still will, hopefully people will be able to understand me. I will get the translation in Jérier. But I think reading the further comments of PPC, if it's made official, like if somebody did want to speak the whole in French, somebody would have to do the work. Sorry, I'm going to French, but if we make this official as Jérier's, somebody would then have to go and do the work and have a full translation. So probably need some qualifications and some understanding from where the deputy understands this, but that's how I understand it, if we actually make it official. I really, sir, your intervention was most unhelpful just before I spoke. Thank you.
Senator Minzek.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly, I think the fact that this is a bilingual assembly is actually one of the nice things about the way we do things here, and I think that's something that not only should be preserved, but in this instance, when there's an extra unique thing about our island, surely it's right to be expanding that to make this a place that reflects our unique Jersey identity a little bit more. The fact is that in the States of Jersey law and the standing orders of the Assembly, there aren't strict rules about how language can be used, apart from avoiding the language of unparliamentary language. So this is an issue to do with the convention, and the convention was changed 119 years ago to allow English to be spoken here, and so I'm sure that we would have seen lots of arguments against that at the time. I know it wasn't a unanimous vote that passed it then, and 119 years later, look where we are. Things change, and the thing that I think sometimes frustrates me about the debate on what role Gérié should have in our society is that I think there's too much of a tendency actually to look back at the role it's played in our history rather than ask the question about what role it will play in our future. I think the fact is that some of the work that's been done to preserve the language and give it new life, I think, has been really interesting and in some instances inspirational. And a few years ago, I would have been somebody that would have said, oh, it's a dead language, what's the point in bothering with all of this? And I've completely changed my mind because I've seen it to be used as a force for good. The fact that in schools, some of the people who are best able to pick up the language happen to be kids who are from Portuguese or Polish backgrounds because their brain is already used to dealing in more than one language, and so to pick up another one becomes easier. So to see it as a unifying force that brings us together around our identity it's a unique island with its unique identity. I can't see anything negative coming from this. I don't think we're going to be faced with a situation where members attempt to persuade people to vote one way on something by speaking to them or lecturing them in a language they don't understand, because practically that would make no sense. Why would anyone do that? It's already the case that French can be used in this assembly when some of us, French is not good enough to understand it in depth, but we don't question removing French as one of the languages of this assembly because it's one of the things that makes it special. So I completely support Deputy Tadier's amendment. I think it's a nice thing to do, and what it will do is it will help ingrain this in our consciousness. We will start picking up more phrases. The very few Gérié phrases that I do know are phrases that I've picked up from the songs that, of course, Deputy Tadier has been a part of giving new life with his musical endeavours. I see nothing bad coming from this. It's not going to have any negative impact on the work of the Assembly. It just helps make our identity and add something special to what we're doing.
Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And I'm afraid I'm the old curmudgeon in this debate because I can see very little sense or sensibility in both this proposition and the amendment. And my reservations about it start basically with the fact that we keep mentioning a language. We're not talking about a language. We're talking Jersey French, Norman French. We're talking a patois. It's not a language. It's not recognised elsewhere in any international sense whatsoever, whereas French and English are. And we can communicate in either with other people. But we can't with a patois, because that is, by definition, localised. And whether we like it or not, we heard some hopeful pieties and some wishful thinking from the proposer of this proposition, I think, because when it push comes down to shove, a language will survive if it has either power or status. And if we look at the Welsh language, which is surviving and healthy, that status came with, it was representative of the fierce independence and the wish to be independent that the Welsh felt at the time. That's why Welsh survived and grew and is still growing, and because it's attached to that status of being Welsh and the pride that that comes with. But like it or not, I'm afraid, over the last century and increasingly in more recent years, we have become increasingly Anglo-centric. Talk to any young person in Jersey and see where his culture is coming from. It's Anglo-centric. It's estuary English. It's the city, our main industry. It's the city, the attachment's there. It's with English. And that status doesn't, I don't think, exists to allow us to recreate and make survive a patois. I've already witnessed it twice today. I've had 2 sentences of Gerrier, both of which I didn't understand, and neither of which have been translated. Do we really want to start that as a way forward at this stage in our history? I don't believe we are, or we should be. I'm afraid that both the amendment and the proposition both fail with me. In particular, which is a single reason, I'm always sceptical of someone who uses the words common sense so repeatedly as the proposer did in his opening speech. It was common sense, we were told. Common sense is a wide field and one which is very rarely specific. So I don't believe it's common sense either to do either of these proposed.
On the Constable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow Deputy Southern because I actually don't agree with him at all. I do agree that we should give power to language. And I do believe that Gerriers is a very intrinsic part of our heritage and culture. And my children, who are only 20 and 22, learnt Gerriers at school and went in the Eisteddfod, so they do, and they see themselves as very European, actually. They don't see themselves as estuary English at all. And I'm glad that you mentioned Wales, because as part of the CPA Westminster seminar in November, we were taken to visit the Welsh Assembly, and we spent a day there. And we were greeted in Welsh. None of us in the coach, there were about 50 of us from all over the world, none of us spoke Welsh. We had a couple of speeches in Welsh, which were then translated. And it was very good, because then you realise that you're actually in Wales, you weren't in England, you weren't part of England, you were different. We are not part of England. We do speak English. We do have French here. And we have a language that Norman French gave the root words to a lot of the English language. So I'm also, following on from this, I'm very pleased that because it's the year of the Indigenous language, and as you all know, you granted us a loan for the redevelopment of the old school, which is Le Vieille École, which my Jersey French is not good, or my French pronunciation. But we have taken, we had a unanimous decision that every sign in the old school will be in Jersey French and English. And I'm very pleased to support the proposition. I do believe that if anyone does speak Jersey French in the Assembly, it will be well translated. And I think it's something that we must not let it die. Let's give it power. And in the Welsh Assembly, I can assure you that not everybody in the Welsh Assembly speaks Welsh, but they did say that one of the very good points that it is their official language is that more and more people do speak Welsh because of that. So maybe there is hope for Gerriers. So thank you.
On the Constable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. There are many of you in this Assembly who were not born in Jersey. There are many of you in this Assembly who have Jersey connections, either by marriage or family relationships. All of you are very proud to be associated with Jersey. It is why you chose to serve your island.
Through the chair, Constable again, members. not you. That's the way we.
Thank you, sir. I can understand if people have a passion for the Jersey language, the Jerier language, as you will want to further embrace our island culture to become part of it. I am a Jersey man. I am proud to be. I don't share that enthusiasm for Jerier. It does not give me any more right to an opinion than it does to anyone else who lives here. I admire anyone who speaks Jerier, or indeed anyone who wishes to learn the language. I am a practical Jerseyman. I know that the language was from a bygone era. It serves no practical use. It never will. If I quote John Keller, the author of The Triumph of the Country, as follows, he states, "What Deputy Masson seeks is to give Jerier a role it never had historically. It was always primarily a spoken language. It had no written form until a small group of individuals interested in the language decided to create one, fearful as they were that Jerier, and indeed French, was being swamped by the English language. This creative process did not commence until at least the mid-19th century, and really only became well established after World War II. However, the written form has never been used beyond a small group of academically minded individuals. It was never used by locals as a form of communication until the advent of English as the most universal language of our island. French proper was the mode of written communication. To take steps now to use Jerier as written language on official signage and departmental letterheadings is simply to rewrite history. Put another way, it is to seek to create an aspect of our identity that never existed. That, with respect, is rather muddle-headed. Our history is very clearly something we should treasure, and I fully accept it contributes to our identity. But if we are to make use of it to that end, we must make sure we are truly representing that history and not recasting any of its component parts into a different form. This island accepted to be part of England in 1204. We have remained loyal to the Crown ever since. English is the chosen language adopted throughout most of the world. Understandably, French was a major language throughout those centuries in Jersey. This is reflected in our legal system, with our laws, deeds, and advocates' training being conducted in French until quite recently. If someone wishes to learn a language in order to converse in business or to help people throughout this world, then it has to be a modern-day language that is spoken and understood by all in that domain. Jerier has its place for those wishing to preserve a past culture, and it should be encouraged, but not imposed upon us, or take precedence when taught in schools. As to there being no financial implications with this, does that mean that if I had my van sign written, that I would have one side done in Jerier free of charge? I was elected to implement important issues. This is not one of them. We have to accept that Jerier in this modern day is as much use as a chocolate teapot. Thank you, sir.
I call on Deputy Labby.
Oh, we're all getting very precious over this issue, unusually for the Constable of St Mary. Surely what Deputy Tadier is doing, it's nothing to be frightened of, is giving the language a status, a recognition by being one of the official languages of the Assembly. And I speak as the son and grandson of Jérier speakers, but not a speaker of the language myself, alas, because of attitudes, 40 plus years ago, which is sad. And I applaud all the efforts being made by the deputies to help revive the language and put it on the map. And the work that Tony Scott Warren and all his colleagues have done recently is absolutely amazing, and I applaud that too. I think this amendment from Deputy Tadier will mean that people will begin to see the language on signs. It'll spark interest, they'll Google it, and it'll counter the argument that, it isn't even, look this up, see what it's about, but it isn't even one of the official languages of the island's parliament. I think it's in name only, it won't be used on important matters, and I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. It's putting our money where our mouth is. And I propose the adjournment. Propose the adjournment, sir. Oh, maybe a bit earlier.
Members, I have 3 members wishing to speak, quite apart from Deputy Tadier who wish to reply, so it probably is a sensible time to adjourn, particularly because there's an announcement I wish to make about the hospital propositions that we've got coming up later on in the sitting. I wanted to make an announcement about the procedure which we will follow dealing with the amendments to P5, Deputy Labby's proposition on the site of the future hospital. We originally had 2 amendments to Deputy Labby's proposition, one from the Constable of St Helier and one from Deputy Morrell, both of which were straightforward to deal with. However, the 3rd amendment, lodged by the Treasury Minister, and there's no implied criticism, or far I hasten to add, restructures the proposition into paragraphs, and it means that the original amendments from the Constable of St Helier and Deputy Morrell will fall if the 3rd amendment is adopted. Both members therefore lodged the text of their original amendments as amendments to the 3rd amendment as well, to the Treasury Minister's amendment as well. But it is theoretically possible, and it may politically happen, who knows, that their amendments could be adopted, but the whole of the Treasury Minister's amendment could be rejected, and that would leave us with just Deputy Labby's main proposition to debate and vote on. And in those circumstances, if we reached that position, Standing Order 20, paragraph 3, prevents a proposition from being debated within 3 months of a debate and vote on the same proposition, or a proposition on substantially the same terms, and therefore it would prevent the original amendments from the Constable of St Helier and Deputy Morrell being debated. And that would frustrate, it would be a perverse and unintended outcome of the standing order, and it could frustrate the will of the Assembly on those matters. So in my view, the situation is one which is not provided for in standing orders, and Standing Order 167 enables me to decide on the proposition which ought to be followed. And so I am going to take the amendments and the proposition in this way. First of all, Deputy Labby will move his proposition as usual. I will then invite the Treasury Minister to move her amendment, the 3rd amendment, and members will vote on that amendment. If the amendment is adopted, we will then move on to the amendments to the Treasury Minister's amendment lodged by the Constable of St Helier. And once that has been debated and voted on, we will deal with the amendment lodged by Deputy Morrell, including the amendment lodged by the Council of Ministers. So far, so good. If the Treasury Minister's amendment is rejected, we therefore will return to the original proposition, but we will debate the amendments lodged by the Connétable of St Helier and the amendments lodged by Deputy Morel to the original proposition. Once all the amendments have been dealt with, there will be a debate and vote on the main proposition, either in its original form or as amended. But what the process which I have just described does is it ensures that there will be effective votes on all the amendments. Whatever the outcome of those votes might be, they will be effective votes. And also that we won't have the same debate on Deputy Morel's and the Connétable St Helier's amendments twice. So that is the process we're going to adopt this afternoon. Before the Deputy Labby says anything to me, I know all members will have found this to be absolutely crystal clear that the greffier, as is not always the case, is doing nothing over lunch and would be delighted to talk to members further about it.
So I'm sure the Assembly is grateful for that direction. I was going to ask, and this now might be redundant in the light of what you've just said, I was going to ask if it would have been in order for me to propose my proposition as amended by the third amendment by the Treasury Minister, because it is wording I would have used had Treasury had it available to me at the time I lodged the proposition.
That's always possible, as we've just seen with Deputy Mussol proposing his proposition subject to his own amendment, as long as everybody in the Assembly is happy that that's the process that should be adopted. If the Assembly is not happy to adopt that process, then you would have to propose your amendment, your proposition as first drafted.
Do you want to make it a proposition?
Well, I'm just seeing whether anyone's at all interested in it.
So could we consider these matters over the lunchtime and decide when we come
that
back?
would be sensible, and we will return to it. The proposition in relation to the hospital comes later on the agenda, so we'll finish the Gerrier propositions after lunch, and then we will return to this issue then. States on adjourned until 2:15.